Cathedral in Edinburgh. Stay tuned to GB News. We bring you all the updates throughout the day from north of the border.
I would love to be in Scotland this morning.
Pomp and pageantry at its best. They had a separate coronation in 1953. There was some criticism of it, actually, because the Queen was dressed in civvies and she wasn't in all her regalia. So I think Charles and Camilla will be, the King and Queen, will be, I think, a little more dressed in keeping.
Taking it seriously.
And the jewels that are involved, it's the oldest crown in the oldest crown in the crown jewels, 1540.
Wow.
Amazing. So we'll be there for that.
We will.
And also we're going to be talking about Alzheimer's, because that's a hugely important. So I've known Fiona Phillips for 20 years. She's a terrific woman, terrific journalist, terrific presenter. And she found out 18 months ago she's got Alzheimer's.
Oh, it's awful. And in fact, she's married to Martin Frizzell, who is the editor of This Morning. He was obviously embroiled in the whole Philip Schofield story. None of us knew behind the scenes. He was also dealing with all of that as well. Her
parents, of course, died of dementia too, so we'll bring you on later on that. But the top story this morning is, of course, the NHS. It is 75 years old today. The Health Secretary, Stephen Barclay, has written about whether it's now time for evolution rather than revolution.
But as we celebrate the NHS today, as it turns 75, we're also asking if it's fit for purpose. 3 main health think tanks have warned that the NHS won't make it to its 100th birthday without support.
And Tony Blair's been talking about, 2 of which will be more later. Now, GB News Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood has been looking back at the institution's colourful history.
I've been asked to tell you just a little about this new plan for better health. Our plan is a service which will provide the best medical advice and treatment for everyone, every man, woman and child in this country.
These were the words of Conservative Health Minister Henry Willink speaking in 1944, announcing his plans for what would become the NHS. His 1944 White Paper was the blueprint for the National Health Service.
Mr. Aneurin Bevan.
But it was Aneurin Bevan, the Labour Minister for Health, who brought the NHS into existence in July 1948. Under Bevan, the reach of the state stretched further than the original Conservative plans. Care was not only to be paid for by the taxpayer, but hospitals themselves were nationalised too. Healthcare professionals became government employees. The NHS quickly became a cherished national institution. But the course was not always smooth. Prescription charges were introduced in 1952 after the cost of the service unexpectedly began to grow. The ensuing decade saw the NHS buffeted by various political winds. The Conservative years under Thatcher and Major introduced internal markets, attempting to increase efficiency. Under Blair's Labour government, these reforms were built upon, aided by significant injections of funding into the service. The new funding smoothed the path to a drive of modernisation, patient choice and public-private partnerships. Blair's devolution agenda also saw the Scotland Act and the Government of Wales Act give devolved bodies powers to legislate on a range of issues, including health, leading to greater divergence in health policy across the UK. Yet, in the backdrop of the 2008 financial crash, the budget balancing measures of David Cameron's coalition government led to smaller real terms increases in budgets than occurred under Labour, and a controversial reorganisation under the Health and Social Care Act of 2012, creating clinical commissioning groups and increasing competition in service provision. The past decade brought with it unprecedented challenges. The NHS's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic under Boris Johnson's government, to many displayed its resilience and adaptability. To others, it exposed shortcomings. Frontline staff faced overwhelming pressure, yet they rose to the challenge, embodying the spirit of the service envisaged 75 years ago. Today, the NHS budget has never been higher, yet waiting lists and patient care face significant strains. The cost of the service has risen by 50% in real terms when compared to 2009. As we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the NHS, the debate continues on how to sustainably fund and manage this British institution. With an ageing population, new medical innovations and a consequently ballooning budget, questions remain as to what the NHS will look like after another 75 years. Tom Harwood, GB News.
So joining us now is our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, from St Bart's Hospital in London, the oldest hospital in the UK. Good morning, Tom. It's a date that we feel like celebrating because it is remarkable and it is a world leader in terms of free healthcare for everyone. But it has never been in a more desperate state than it is today. Just speak to anybody who's used the NHS. Everybody has complaints. Where are we at with it in 2023? Do you get a clear vision of what each political party would do?
Yes, it's an interesting position, isn't it? 75 years ago, the plan for the NHS was that it wouldn't be a big financial burden. The original idea was that given comprehensive universal coverage for healthcare, the cost would actually come down as people led healthier lives and we had a less sick society. Well, that quickly did not turn out to be the case. The costs kept rising and rising. And then back in 1952, only a few years into the establishment of the NHS, prescription charges were introduced and other measures were introduced, whether it was tax raising and all the rest of it, to pay for a more and more expensive service. And still there are huge strains on this service, as we've seen expanding waiting lists, as we've seen people not getting the same level as care that they would get in perhaps some other European countries, despite similar levels of funding now. So there are some huge challenges for the NHS as it stands 75 years since its inception. And yet politicians always tend to dance around the edges of this big question of how might it be reformed. It's interesting, you mentioned not so long ago Tony Blair wading into this discussion, also Sajid Javid saying much the same thing, the idea of some sort of royal commission to compare how we fundamentally run the NHS in the United Kingdom compared to other universal systems of healthcare on the continent, for example. And yet it's interesting, the politicians who say this tend to be politicians who have left their jobs. Sajid Javid standing down at the next election, a former member of the cabinet rather than a current one. And of course, Tony Blair, long since it has been since he was Prime Minister. It tends to be that politicians who are in power as things stand are very wary of big, fundamental questions about how the NHS is run.
Tony Blair has sparked some controversy, particularly for Labour MPs, because he's written an article about demanding brave political leadership, but 6 times in that article he's talked about an expanded role for the private sector, something that Wes Streeting, who's doing the Shadow Health Secretary job, has already ruled out this morning.
Yes, it's interesting. Wes Streeting seems to have been backwards and forwards on this issue. He has said in the past that a role for bringing in private provision to fill in the gaps or reduce waiting lists would be acceptable for him. So it's interesting to hear him slightly row back from that position today. But it is true that the role of the private sector was expanded under the new Labour government. Although in this discussion, it does tend to be that sort of conspiracy creeps into the conversation. When we're talking about the role of the private sector, no one is talking about anyone being charged for healthcare. This is simply about who provides that healthcare. There are all sorts of scary graphs about how much quote-unquote private provision is there within the NHS and how it's crept up from sort of 3% to sort of 8% in recent years. That includes, for example, getting in cleaning firms that aren't NHS employees but are contractors. It doesn't seem like that is a particularly unwise thing to do. There are many ways in which efficiencies could be drawn through that. And indeed, there are other countries around the world that do deliver their healthcare much more in that way, where the state funds the healthcare but the private sector delivers it. That is the case in lots of other countries, although I'm not sure that anyone is suggesting we go for a full 100% privately provided, state-funded option as some countries lean towards. No one has really spelled out in great detail the reforms that they would like to see to the NHS. The furthest that we've seen people go is talking in more abstract terms or in the process they would like to see, whether it is Sajid Javid's idea of a royal commission, for example, or talking about learning from other systems as well. It does seem that now there is a greater sense of conversation around what we could learn from other countries. Back in 1948, 75 years ago, the UK was was not unique, but very rare in the world in terms of delivering universal healthcare. It was only Prussia and Norway that had got there before the United Kingdom. These days, most developed countries in the world, with the notable exception of the United States of America, deliver some form or other of universal healthcare. So there are lots of different models of how this universal access to healthcare is delivered around the world now, and there are some voices saying those are models from which we could learn, although it does seem that both the government and the Labour Party are wary of wading into that conversation.
Howard, our deputy political editor from St Bart's. There's also, of course, a big service today at Westminster Abbey to mark the 70th anniversary, where some people who were some of the first people to ever work in the NHS will be taking part.
You know, what Tony Blair also is looking into is tech. Tony Blair's solution to everything, he's such a technocrat, is about an app, having an app with all your NHS information on it. And again, it's a bit like we were talking about, and it does transition into Liam Halligan, who's sat here with us, it transitions into this technological society which is leaving people behind, because there'll be a lot of elderly people who don't necessarily have the latest smartphone to put all their health records on.
Or might not have a smartphone at all.
Yeah.
And the idea of an app, because we were talking about an app yesterday, how you have to increasingly use apps to park your blooming car.
Yeah.
Which brings us on to don't get rid of cash, and here's Liam Halligan.
Don't kill cash.
Exactly, our campaign.
This indeed is the GB News campaign. We launched it yesterday morning. We think a lot of people are vulnerable because cash is being phased out. So we're asking people to sign our petition. And already our petition is up at 88,000 signatures. If we get to 100,000 signatures, then we can start applying for debates in Parliament and so on. And the extent to which cash is being phased out really is quite incredible. In 2012, 60% of transactions were still in cash. And now it's just 30% of transactions. At this pace, by 2035, there's going to be no cash whatsoever. And at the same time, the number of ATMs has fallen by 25% since 2018. And there's a lot of older people in particular who need cash. They haven't got smartphones. They want to use cash. And also, if everything is not cash, if everything's bank transfers, every single transaction we do can be monitored by banks and therefore potentially by the state. And a lot of people are concerned about that as well.
Yeah.
It's like a surveillance society.
Well, you got this sense of what's called surveillance capitalism, that we are the product. Everything we do online, everything we buy, everywhere we go is monitored, and then that information can be sold to third parties who want to, bombard us with tailored adverts to flog us stuff using money that we've got to borrow, given that there's a cost of living crisis. So this is why GB News has launched this campaign, and it seems as if this is really resonating with our readers, viewers, listeners. It's an online campaign as well, so get on gbnews.com/cash and you can sign that petition
and here's
too.
the thing, I remember as a child being introduced to cash with my pocket money. We didn't get very much,
your piggy
actually.
bank.
Yeah, and we had a little tiny safe with a combination code, red plastic one.
Yeah.
I'm proud of it. Do parents still give children cash for pocket money?
They do, certainly older people. The culture I'm from, some old guy in the pub would just slip you a quid or slip you a fiver because you were the kid of a friend. It's a way of bringing people together.
Yeah.
If we lose physical cash, we lose so much, don't we? We lose, where's my 20 quid in my birthday card?
Yeah.
I want to tip that busker because that piece of music while I was walking through the town centre really resonated with me. I want to give 5 quid to this waitress tonight because she's done a great job, and I want to make sure that she gets the 5 quid, not the restaurant owner.
Absolutely.
If it goes through the books. So it is a privacy thing, it's a culture thing, and yet there are huge vested interests who want to get rid of cash, all the businesses, the cash handling costs and so on.
Yeah.
Liam, aren't you surprised by how little the debate has been had around moving towards a cashless society?
I am, and that's why we're trying to do something about it here on GB
because
News.
I remember during the pandemic when all of these shops had put up little signs, do not take cash, and it was under the illusion that the virus could be transmitted by fomites on surfaces. The government knew really quickly that it wasn't transmittable on surfaces because it's an airborne virus. But they did nothing to disavow us of that particular misunderstanding. And they still haven't, because there are a lot of people who want this change to happen?
Yeah, a lot of business interests want this change to happen. A lot of the tech giants want this change to happen so they can monitor everything that we do. A lot of
and
people,
governments who want to know where
in
your
the state
taxes
want this to happen because they are forever suspicious that if we're using cash, then people aren't paying the right amount of tax and so on. And look, just in the last sort of few hours, a story's broken that's completely chimes with this subject that we're discussing now. So the train operating companies, the rail delivery group, the sort of umbrella group for the train operating companies, they're going to announce today that they're going to close down, or they're proposing to close down, almost all ticket offices.
I hate this.
Really
Now,
bad.
You know,
it's awful.
2/3 of railway stations still have ticket offices. If they're closed down, OK, it's a safety thing, right?
Yeah.
It's a value for money thing, because you can often ask, you know, the people that sit in ticket offices, they're really knowledgeable.
They give you a much cheaper price than you get out of the machine.
In my experience, they want to help you to get the best deal.
I agree with you.
How can you get the best deal when you're on using an app that may be run by the train operating company? You can't.
And think about people coming to this country who are from abroad and
right.
train, baffling those machines. They baffle me.
Again, this is a legacy of COVID, Bev, as you were saying, because the train companies lost so much money during COVID, because they were running, for some reason, endless ghost trains. What was all that about? Just endless empty trains. I didn't understand why that was. As somebody who, you know, as a journalist, a filmmaker, documentary maker, I had special dispensation. I was allowed to travel around the country during lockdown making films. In fact, I made a couple of films about the trains during lockdown and the kind of craziness of the amount of money they were losing. And now you've got the Treasury that wants to cut any government subsidy to the train companies, and the train companies are saying, all right, then we're going to have to close pretty much all the ticket offices in England. We're just talking about England at the moment. That's going to massively denude our train network, which means it will spiral downwards.
And passengers will get ripped off as a result.
They will.
Those machines are so difficult.
We've all three of us had our gripes, haven't we, with the rail unions? But I think on this point they are exactly right. We do desperately need to keep, you know, the majority of those ticket offices open for all kinds of reasons.
But fancy doing it now when they're in a dispute already with the RMT. I mean, that's just going to inflame tensions.
It is.
Is there no joined-up thinking in this?
I think it might have been a leak or something, Andrew.
Right.
We don't. In fact, we don't know. The word is that these proposals are going to be announced today, but now they might not be, because we're all focused on them. They might be released, you know, on a Friday afternoon or something.
It's red meat to the unions.
Absolutely.
We've just gone above 90,000 signatures in our...
Well done, everybody.
So
just while we've been
really
on air.
Important. Don't kill cash, over 90,000. We're within touching distance.
Just to say, there's a QR code there, which is slightly ironic, because you need a smartphone to use a QR code. But you can also absolutely sign the petition, gbnews.com/cash. Go to that URL on the internet.
That's the easiest way to do it.
That's the easiest way to do it. And it's literally one button, and you can fill in your details.
Even I did it.
Silver surfer that you are, or partially silver surfer.
Liam Halligan, we love seeing you. Well, you didn't give us a graphic.
Oh, yeah.
Another time, I'm toying with you.
Right, thanks, Liam. OK, now moving on. Scotland will today mark the coronation of King Charles III with a ceremony at St Giles's Cathedral in Edinburgh.
He's going to be presented with the crown jewels of Scotland, and the proceedings will include a new sword, because the old one is literally very shaky, which is to be named after the late Queen Elizabeth II.
So let's speak to GB News' royal correspondent Cameron Walker, who joins us now from Edinburgh. What's happening up there this morning, Cameron? Lucky you, being up in the fresh air of Edinburgh.
Fresh air and sunshine, Bev, unlike yesterday where it was a bit of a washout, unfortunately, for the Royal Garden Party. But today it's a very historic day here in Edinburgh. The barriers are out, the crowds are starting to gather because it's the first time since 1953 that a British monarch has been presented with the honours of Scotland. In other words, the Scottish crown jewels. 700 members of the armed forces will be in a procession up the Royal Mile here in Edinburgh from the British Army, Royal Air Force and Royal Navy as well, all led by a Shetland pony, who is the mascot of the Royal Regiment of Scotland. There's also going to be a tri-service Guard of Honour who will greet the King, the Queen and the Prince and Princess of Wales, who are known as the Duke and Duchess of Rothesay here in Scotland. And then there's going to be a service of thanksgiving at St Giles's Cathedral, where the King will be presented with the crown, with the sceptre and that new sword called Elizabeth. And the new sword, bearing in mind it's 5 foot long, 7.5 kilograms. It's very, very heavy.
We can get any
and Dame
views.
Catherine Granger, the former Olympic gold medalist, she is going to be carrying that sword, very similar to what Penny Mordaunt did during the coronation service in May. But the regalia is all being taken from Edinburgh Castle, which you can see behind me, in a people's procession. Representatives from different groups across Scotland, 100 in total, will be taking part in that people's procession, including NHS Scotland, of course, celebrating 75th anniversary today, and the Prince's Trust as well, the charity which the King founded when he was Prince of Wales. Following the service of Thanksgiving, there's going to be a 21-gun salute from Edinburgh Castle, and weather permitting, it's looking promising so far, but the Red Arrows are going to be flying over Edinburgh Castle, down the Royal Mile, and over the Palace of Holyrood House as well. So lots to look forward to. Not everyone is very happy, though. The Scottish Green leaders, as we were discussing yesterday, they have boycotted the service of Thanksgiving, as has the former SNP leader, Alex Salmond. So we'll just have to wait and see just how many protests there are. We are expecting a few, and whether or not they are outnumbered by supportive crowds.
And Cameron, I'm fascinated by the history of all this because the crown, the Scottish crown, is of course the oldest crown in the crown jewels, dating all the way back to 1540. And I know it was atop the Queen's funeral when she was lying in state at St Giles's Cathedral.
Yeah, so Scotland had its own monarchs up until the union of the crowns in 1603, where Queen Elizabeth I of England died without a son or a daughter, and her cousin was heir to the throne, who happened to be James VI of Scotland, and then he became James I of England. But as for the Scottish crown jewels, they are the oldest in the British Isles, because the ones which are kept in the Tower of London, they were made for King Charles II's coronation, because the old ones were melted down following the English Civil War. But the sceptre was a gift from James IV, from Pope Alexander VI. The Sword of State, the very old one, which is no longer in use because it's too fragile, that was another gift to James IV as well. The crown was refashioned into its current form in 1540. That's how old we are talking here, by an Edinburgh goldsmith whose name was John Mosman. So it's clearly got a lot of history here. And that crown was used in the coronation of Mary, Queen of Scots, and James VI of Scotland, Charles I and Charles II as well. And then, of course, it was presented to Queen Elizabeth II during that service of Thanksgiving back in 1953. And since 1999, it's been processed to the opening of the Scottish Parliament as well. So a lot of history associated with it.
Absolutely. That's Cameron Walker. We'll be back with him later in the programme. Cameron Walker in Edinburgh for the coronation in Scotland of the King and Queen. That crown was worn by Mary, Queen of Scots at her coronation. You know what happened to her a few years later? Afraid her head was chopped off.
I don't
on the orders of Elizabeth I.
Happening here. Amazing story in the papers today. We're going to have Stephen Pound and Emma Webb are going to be here in a moment. And the story of Sir Captain Tom, remember him?
Lovely man.
All that money during lockdown, what his family built a £1.2 million swimming pool in the back garden, and now they're going to have to pull it down. You don't want to go anywhere. You want to hear the details of that. This is GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast for Wednesday. A bright start for many of us, but cloud is already building, especially towards the north and the west, and we'll see a scattering showers by the afternoon. However, the wet weather that many southern parts of the UK experienced yesterday, that's well on its way into the Low Countries, along with a strengthening wind. Gales could cause disruption for the Netherlands and Germany during the day. But across the UK, actually, the weather settles down as that system clears through. There'll be a lot of cloud, but some glimmers of sunlight coming through at times. And there'll also be a scattering of showers. These will be hit and miss. Some places will avoid them and stay dry, but where the showers do occur, they could be quite heavy. Otherwise, where we avoid the showers, temperatures comfortably reaching 22 or 23 Celsius in the south and southeast, 17 to 19 across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, which actually is about bang on average for the time of year. Then into the evening, we're going to see the showers fade away in most places, but not everywhere. There will still be some showers across western Scotland, 1 or 2 for Northern Ireland and North Wales, for example. Best chance of dry and clear weather towards the southeast. However, most places will keep temperatures in the double figures, 11 to 14 Celsius as we begin Thursday. Thursday starts off with some sunshine. Eastern Scotland, for example, the Northern Isles, the Midlands, East Anglia and the South seeing some decent blue skies first thing. The cloud will develop, though, and by lunchtime I think it is mostly cloudy out there. That cloud giving a few showers once again for Scotland, Northern England and North Wales. But Northern Ireland turns wetter by the afternoon with some strengthening winds from the south. 18 Celsius here, 21 or 22 Celsius towards the southeast. That wetter and windier weather pushes into Scotland on Friday, turns more showery, whilst England and Wales turn drier, sunnier and warmer, with temperatures approaching 30 Celsius by the start of the weekend in the southeast.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 5th of July. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
And a very happy birthday to the NHS. It's 75 years old today. We're going to take a close look at the NHS through the ages and asking, is it still fit for purpose?
Let us know your experiences, won't you, on that? Also, don't kill cash. The People's Channel is fighting to save the pound in your pocket and stop financial exclusion. We have received over 88,000. It's 90,000 now, isn't it? 93. 93. Well done. 93 signatures. It's not even 2 full days yet. Sign up on our website, gbnews.com/cash.
And a very sad story concerning the legendary TV broadcaster Fiona Phillips. She's revealed today that she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's when she was 60. She's just 62. She's trialling a new drug which may slow or reverse the condition. We're wishing you all the very best, Fiona.
And a busy day in Scotland today. They are marking the coronation of the King and Queen north of the border in what's shaping up to be a stunning service of Thanksgiving at St Giles's Cathedral in Edinburgh. Stay tuned to GB News. We'll bring you the latest updates throughout the day. Particularly tell us what you would do to save the NHS if it was your decision to make. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. We've got Howard Cox coming in as well, haven't we?
We have, to talk about the court case to try and stop the expansion of the ultra-low emission zone in London. And let me tell you, those ultra-low emission zones are coming to towns all over England.
They really are. But first of all, here is your news with Tamsin Roberts.
Bev, thanks very much and good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's 1 minute past 10. As the NHS celebrates its 25th anniversary, Labour is warning the service will die without further investment and modernisation. Around 7.4 million people are on NHS waiting lists, and the government has acknowledged the figure could get worse before it gets better. It comes as a YouGov poll shows 1 in 3 people across the country have found it difficult to access services. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the NHS is facing the worst crisis in its history and people who can't afford to go private are being left behind.
I'm deeply angry about the two-tier system we have in our country today, where those who can afford it are paying to go private and those who can't afford it are being left behind. And my answer would be, in the short term, where there is spare capacity in the private sector, we should be paying for it on NHS terms so that people who can't afford it are getting it free at the point of use. That would be my answer. I've got no objection to using private sector capacity to get NHS waiting lists down faster.
Health Minister Maria Caulfield, who is also a nurse, says strike action is putting more pressure on the service.
Although we've got more people on the waiting list, the waiting times are coming down. And I think for most people who are waiting for an operation or a procedure, it's how long they wait, not who else is on that waiting list. And we've eliminated the 2-year wait. We've virtually eliminated the 18-month wait. And we're now working on those who are waiting for a year. So it's really important that we do that. And strike action doesn't help, to be honest. It does mean that procedures and operations are often cancelled. So that's why we do want the unions to come around the table and try and resolve that for patients.
Meanwhile, the Prince and Princess of Wales surprised NHS staff by dropping in for a tea party at a hospital. William and Kate helped lay tables at a reception at St Thomas's Hospital to celebrate the NHS's 75th anniversary. The royals met guests, including Anira Thomas, the first baby born on the NHS, named after NHS founder Anira Bevan. It was hosted by NHS Charities Together, which the Prince and Princess are patrons of. The Metropolitan Police have reopened an investigation into potential COVID breaches at pandemic-era parties at Tory headquarters. Police are reopening their investigation into the Jingle and Mingle lockdown party at Conservative Party HQ on the 8th of December 2020, which Tory MP Sir Bernard Jenkin is said to have attended. Sir Bernard has responded in a statement yesterday saying it's not appropriate to comment on a continuing investigation. The Met says new evidence have prompted them to look into a second event held at Conservative HQ on December the 14th, 2020. Faith leaders call for a just and compassionate asylum policy. The Archbishops of Canterbury and York are renewing their calls for the government to change its illegal migration bill in a letter to the Times newspaper. According to faith leaders, the legislation falls short of our obligation towards the most vulnerable. And they say that we need an alternative approach that reflects the country's history, values and responsibility. Students and parents face more disruptions today as schools in England face closure as teachers walk out again over pay and conditions. As well as lessons, end-of-term events like school trips and sports day are predicted to face disruption. Striking teachers will march in Westminster before taking part in a rally in Parliament Square this afternoon. It's the 7th day individual schools in England have faced walkouts by National Education Union teacher members this year. Members of the NEU will also walk out this Friday. The rise of artificial intelligence is the most profound shift in technology, according to a new report by Google. The tech giant says AI has the power to turbocharge UK productivity and has the potential to boost Britain's economy by £400 billion. Google backed the need for regulation of emerging technology, but stressed it should be a nuanced approach to not stop innovation in the field. Prisons in England and Wales are reaching breaking point, the Conservative chairman of the Justice Committee has warned. Sir Bob Neal said there are real issues with prison officer recruitment, retention and low morale, warning of a potential powder keg for the future. He urged ministers to prioritise and increase their efforts in prison capacity and overcrowding, the quality of the prison estate, prison and probation workforce shortages and also the youth custody estate. The King will be presented the Scottish Crown Jewels at a service in Edinburgh to mark the coronation. King Charles and Queen Camilla will be commemorated at St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh during the event attended by leading public figures and members of a people's procession who will walk through the Scottish capital. The King will receive a crown, a sceptre and a sword made of gold, silver and gems, known collectively as the Honours of Scotland. This is GB News. More headlines from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Well, it's the big story of the day. It is the NHS, our National Health Service, the closest thing I think we have to a national religion. It is 75 years old today. The Health Secretary, Stephen Barclay, has written an article in The Times today saying it's time for an evolution in the NHS, but ruling out revolution.
So as we celebrate the NHS as it turns 75, we've also been asking, is it fit for purpose anymore? 3 main health think tanks have warned that the NHS won't make it to its 100th birthday without support.
Well, I wonder if they're right. Joining us now is the former Health Secretary, Stephen Dorrell. Morning to you, Stephen. When you were Health Secretary, 95, 96, 97, did you think, here we are now, however many years later, the NHS would be in the state it's in? Because it's pretty bad, isn't it, at the moment?
Well, it's undoubtedly under huge stress at the moment. That's inescapably true. Of course, that's at least in part due to the after effects of the pandemic. And it's also not helped by continuing labour disputes. But leave aside those two things, there were growing waiting lists before the pandemic, and there are real issues about access to the health service, whether you're talking about access to the emergency departments of hospitals, access to GPs, access to planned care on waiting lists. There are definitely issues, yes.
And, Stephen, we're talking about the 75 years ago. When the NHS was launched back then in 1948, the population of this country was closer to 50 million. It's nearer 70 million now. We live a lot longer. We've got far more advanced medicines and technologies. The model we devised in 1948 isn't really fit for purpose in 2023, is it?
Well, that's where I disagree with you, because we're celebrating the 75th anniversary of the health service today. Actually, the 1st of April this year was the 70th anniversary of the first time a government set up a royal commission because they were worried about the cost of the health service. And you know what? That commission reported that there were pressures on the health service, not unlike the pressures we have today. And as it happens, 2 of the things that you listed there, Andrew, the rising cost of medicine and the fact that we're living longer, were listed in the Guillebaud report of the early 1950s as things that the health service was the best way of addressing. The third thing they mentioned, which is exactly the same issue now, is that, of course, our expectations are rising and a public service needs to be able to respond to the rising expectations of the population that it serves.
They also, what I've noticed in the last few days, Stephen, hearing politicians talk about this, there seems to be a growing willingness to have a conversation around personal responsibility now, which politicians have often shied away from. Are you in favour of us having that conversation, particularly around obesity, drinking too much, smoking and nobody getting enough exercise?
Well, the answer to that is an unambiguous yes. What we have to understand is that health is partly about treatments received from the health service, but it's also about our diet, our lifestyle, the way we live, and also other public services. It isn't just the NHS which impacts on health outcomes. It's a key issue in social care. It's relevant in social housing. If other public services don't do the job that they're supposed to do, what tends to happen is that people become ill when they didn't need to become ill, and that's, of course, leads to demand on the health service.
What do you make of Tony Blair's call today? You'll have seen his article. He says no fewer than 6 times. Well, first of all, he calls for brave political leadership. I'm not sure we're getting that on the NHS, but he also calls 6 times for an expanded role for the private sector, which has been ruled out already by Wes Streeting, the Labour's health spokesman.
Well, I'm not sure it did rule it out, actually, Andrew. I just heard a clip on your programme saying that the private sector has always played, actually, since 1948, a role in the National Health Service. GPs were set up by Aneurin and Bevan himself as private sector contractors delivering an NHS service. So the NHS has always been a public-private partnership, and I think the stronger for that.
It very much feels, Stephen, as though we are already, as you say, inevitably moving towards a 2-tier system. There are people that can afford private healthcare who are jumping to the front of the queue, and those who can't are having to wait for months and sometimes years. That's one of the most bleak outcomes, isn't it, of the state of the NHS at the moment?
I completely agree that that's a very undesirable outcome. It was actually, again, it was Wes Streeting in his clip rather than me that said we're heading towards a 2-tier service. I'm in favour of people being able to spend their own money on their own healthcare. I don't want to live in a society where you can buy fatty foods and foreign travel, but you can't invest in your own health. That's nonsense. But equally, I want the public services, the NHS, social care, the other public services which impact directly on people's quality of life, to be tested against the best that we could reasonably expect from them, given the rising expectations that I referred to a few moments ago in my first answer.
The perennial argument about money, Stephen. The Tories will have us believe they're paying in record amounts of money. Labour say, oh no, they're not. Is pouring more money into the NHS the answer, or do we need to think of other solutions to try to get to grips with the great problem about waiting lists?
Well, it definitely isn't the only answer. Just tipping money in and standing back and hoping for the best doesn't work. I completely agree with that. I don't think there is an answer that doesn't involve more money, but can I emphasise the point? I think it's the central point, that the NHS is not a public service on a hill, unrelated to other public services around it. If we don't deliver decent housing, people get ill unnecessarily. If we don't deliver social care, people find themselves relying on the health service when they don't need to. This isn't a matter of party political argument. Actually, it's this government that set up integrated care boards, forgive the jargon, which are designed to bring these public services together at a local level. I think that's a step forward. And sometimes ministers should believe in their own policy. This policy was set up 12 months ago. I think it's the right policy, actually. It has cross-party support. Wes Streeting endorses it. So I think that that's the way forward, to have more joined-up public services, rather than asking yet again the question, as I said, that was first asked 70 years ago, can we afford the NHS? The answer is we can, if we ensure that it's kept up to date.
And what of those 3 think tanks who warn if there's not more reform or more money, that there will be no 100th anniversary for the NHS? That's a pretty bleak prediction.
Well, I totally agree with that. I go back to your introduction that it's, as Nigel Lawson famously said, the closest thing we have to an established church, a national religion. I'd put that actually more positively. It makes it sound almost, that's a negative comment. I actually think the National Health Service is a key expression of values that the vast majority of people in this country share, endorse, and think are important. And what we need to do is to ask ourselves, as Tony Blair was saying rightly, the difficult questions about, it's easy enough to make the speech. I've done it hundreds of times. It's easy enough to make the speech about the values of the National Health Service. We have to ensure that we deliver them across the range of public services.
That's Stephen Dorrell, the former Health Secretary in John Major's government. Thanks so much for joining us, because we will be going to that service at some point at Westminster Abbey to offering up prayers, and all sorts of people involved in the NHS at the very beginning are going to be there.
I'm on Don't Kill Cash watch at the moment. This is our GB News campaign. If you can't do the thing with the scanning your phone on the TV, don't worry about that. That's absolutely fine. Go to gbnews.com and you can sign our petition. It's incredibly easy, just a standard website. You've also got a brilliant GB News app if you want to do it on there. But if you don't want to do it on the app, go onto our website and sign the petition to save cash now. I think the latest figure that we've got to is £94,000. 94. Let's see if we can get it to the £100,000 while we're on air this morning.
That's good. And, of course, once it gets to 100,000, we can then press for a debate in the House of Commons. We've got many MPs have already signed this petition, and that would be taking it... It's time it was debated, because the banks are doing it by stealth. They're shutting banks, they're shutting down the hole-in-the-wall machines. And we've seen some shops saying, don't come here, we're not taking cash.
And nobody else is talking about it enough. None of those daytime shows are debating this. Everyone's just going, well, it's what's going to happen, isn't it? It's more convenient. Be very careful of convenience. Now, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel. We'll see you in just a moment.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 10:21. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So we were talking about it yesterday, a judicial review into Sadiq Khan's plans to expand London's ultra-low emission zone. It began at the High Court. 5 Conservative-led councils have launched legal action over the scheme, planned to cover the whole of London from the end of August. But also, it's not just London, is it?
No, I think they've got one in Glasgow, Derby, Bristol. And so,
Bath.
Yeah, Bath,
Birmingham.
it's a daily charge of £9. Birmingham, it's £8.
Yeah.
Bristol, £9. So this is coming everywhere. And of course, in London, £12.50 across every borough. Well, Howard Cox, founder of Fair Fuel UK, is here. You were in court yesterday. How's it going?
Well, it's difficult, as you probably appreciate in these things. They were actually putting out their early arguments. It's only a 2-day judicial review, so they've got to cram a lot in. But it was like watching paint dry, to be honest. I mean, that sort of thing. But it was packed out, a lot of press there.
Yeah.
And but there's certain things in it. The actual Conservatives who are actually putting this case and trying to, stop the ULEZ extension, but let's face it, judicial review is based on the procedure, not the decision itself.
Yeah.
And so what came out yesterday, there was some confusion on the side of the Conservative councillors, lawyers. They actually confused congestion charge with ULEZ, which got sniggered at by the obviously defence lawyers of TfL.
And the judicial review, just to remind people, it's about proving irrationality in the decision-making. I was involved with the judicial review against the government into pushing the COVID vaccine on children.
Yeah.
And so I know a little bit about this process. And what you will have to prove, the Conservative councillors of those areas will have to prove, is that the decision that Sadiq Khan is taking is based on irrational thinking. The evidence is not there to justify the means, isn't it? What are your chances of proving that, Howard?
Well, there's a lot of evidence. For example, last year, the public consultation agreement, what went through, 2 out of 3 disagreed with the ULEZ being extended.
Yeah.
5,000 of my Fair Fuel UK supporters actually responded to that public consultation, but their responses was counted by 1 by Sadiq Khan and TfL. Now, that can't be right. So that's the process, Beverly, you're talking about, in terms of actually the irrationality is right, but was it unlawful getting that decision? He can ignore it. He can completely ignore the decision on this thing and go ahead still. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I'm going back there today and I'll let you know.
Let's ask you too about petrol, Howard, because you've had a pretty important victory. Fair Fuel UK has been campaigning for I don't know how many years for a fuel watchdog. Tell us what's happened, because there's a rather good article by you in the Sun today about it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, for 5 years I've been saying that we've got Ofcom, we've got Ofwat, we've got Ofgem, consumer price regulatory bodies for those industries and those markets, but we've never had it for 37 million drivers. Why? And as you well know, petrol and diesel, when oil goes up and the exchange rate changes, there's no any sort of comparison to actually what it means at the pumps. And so I've been calling on this for a long time, and every time previously the Office of Fair Trading, which is now the Competition and Market Authority, have had 4 or 5 inquiries into this and shown, and they keep saying there's no signs of any collusion or any cartel management. But now they recognise there is, especially from supermarkets.
Yeah, well, we saw that they were overcharging 6p a litre, and that was raising about an extra 900 million. And there's a story in one of the papers today, a Tesco filling station charging 15p a litre more than another petrol filling station 40 miles away. that is ripping people off.
Yes, and you don't see that with milk or bread or anything like those sorts of differences. You might get a penny here and there, but it's absolutely, you can understand certain because the retail state where they are or where their garage is, it could be an expensive place to run and all that sort of things, but not that sort of magnitude. You're actually right, Andrew, and this has been going on for years. It's been pure opportunistic profiteering. And I don't want to blame the retailers themselves. It's further up the fuel supply chain, the wholesalers that manipulate retailers with very tight contracts, and they can't get out of those things. And they're told, you will charge this, even though they want to charge less.
And I heard John Redwood in the Commons, the Tory MP, often appears on this programme, challenging a minister at the dispatch box, what is the tax rate levied on every litre of fuel? And guess what? The minister ducked the answer. You're the expert. What are we paying?
Well, because fuel prices are coming down, now you're looking at around about 55% of everything that goes into the tank is tax. And it's 52.95p for fuel duty, then there's the VAT on the fuel duty.
So you pay VAT on the fuel duty?
Yes, 52. Which is immoral. I mean, that's another one of the campaigning things I want to take up, because I think that is wrong, a tax on a tax. Why are we doing that?
Yeah.
How's your campaign going to be London Mayor Howard Cox? Because you are standing for the Reform Party. The Conservatives have narrowed it down to two, Moz Hussain and...
Susan Hall.
Susan Hall. I can never remember. This is the problem, right? London Mayor needs to be a big character that you instantly know. You could be that person, Howard.
Thank you, Beverly. For 50 years, I voted Tory.
They're very cross with you for not standing for them. You do know that, don't you?
Yes, I know very much indeed. But equally, I've had lots of WhatsApp messages from senior Tories saying, well done, go for it, etc., particularly regarding the pump watch. But really, is there anyone with actually a track record? I'm sorry, it sounds big-headed, I'm blowing my trumpet, but I'm going to do it.
Go for it.
In the last 13 years, I've stopped £200 billion worth of tax rises in fuel duty. I've now got pump watch, etc. And what happened is that Nigel Farage, bless him, of this manor,
parish.
and Richard Tice approached me and said, you know, we would really like you to stand. And I sat down with my wife over a large glass of Malbec, and we sat down and said, yeah, let's do this. I'm 68 years of age. I'm going to go for this and really go for it.
And, of course, one of the campaign issues you can hit Labour hard on is the expansion of the ultra-low emission zone, because I think it's going to go ahead in August, come what may, and it'll be £12.50 on top of the congestion charge. That's going to hit white van man, all sorts of people driving into London.
It's a hurtful tax. It hits, it's a regressive tax, small businesses and obviously low-income families.
And also, let's not forget the fines, Howard. Already, in the 18 months we've had the ultra-low emission zone in the inner boroughs, £400 million. It's a stealth tax.
Well, I've been privy to see a budget in an Excel spreadsheet from the Greater London Assembly. It's actually, they're budgeting for those fines. They've actually got it in over the next 5 years. This is what we're going to get.
And this will be people who don't even know they're in the ultra-low emission zone are going to get a fine.
Correct.
That's right. So why didn't you stand for the Conservatives?
Well, they didn't ask. I've got some great friends.
Fool them.
Well, a lot of the backbench. I mean, I'm very close to people like Robert Halfon, who's Mr. Fairfield UK, you know, for the last 13 years, and I adore that man. He's a great guy, and he can't do it now. He's in his job. He loves education. But I've got something like 70 backbench Tory MPs, and about 20 of them text me with some expletives saying, "Why the?" But good luck. I think we respect each other. But I thought, why not? Let's do this.
And what do you think about our campaign about don't ditch cash?
Don't kill cash.
I'm right behind you. Behind you. Of course I am. I'm an old man. I like a 10-bob note.
Too.
So let me just say then, Howard, so if these ULEZ expansions continue and you get voted in to be London Mayor, would you scrap them on day one?
Right from day one. I'm the only candidate saying scrap all ULEZ.
Across the country. I mean,
whatever happens in London is going to go across the country.
But
I'll get rid of low-traffic neighbourhoods. I'll get rid of 20-mile-an-hour zones, triple the number of bobbies and double the number of affordable houses.
But then you'll ruin the planet, Howard. You'll kill the planet with all your car fumes.
In the last 10 years, emissions have halved in London, and we're about the 21st cleanest city in the world. That's not a headline.
And it's I think ULEZ is a real mistake, because it's hated by drivers and families who simply can't afford it.
Well, I'll give the example of a midwife who works at St Thomas's Hospital, does a shift work over 2 times. She has to pay £55. It's a congestion charge and the ULEZ over 2 days, and she only earns 80 quid for that shift.
And think about carers too.
Yes,
awful.
exactly.
They're not being excluded, and people can't also afford to replace the car to fit in with the modern compliance rules and regulations. So it's going to cause even more difficulties.
Well, I'm coming out with a report with the Alliance of British Drivers and the Motorcycle Action Group, cradle to grave electric vehicles through the way to from actually you get the lithium out of the ground all the way to disposing the batteries right at the end. And believe it or not, EVs are not as green as you think they are.
I'm sure they're not. Howard Cox, you are a great man, and
Good
he's
to
got
see you.
finally the fuel watchdog, so that's good. So finally, the Petrons have been brought into line with Ofcom and Ofwat and all the other regulators. Well done, you.
Right, still to come.
Good story,
the Captain Tom Foundation has stopped donations as the council orders building demolition due to criticism over the daughter building a spa and a swimming pool in her garden.
Without permission.
It's all a bit whiffy, this, isn't it? After your news.
Thanks very much, Bev. Here are the headlines at 10:30. As the NHS celebrates its 75th anniversary, Labour is warning the service will die without further investment and modernisation. Around 7.4 million people are on NHS waiting lists, and the government has acknowledged the figure could get worse before it gets better. It comes as a YouGov poll shows 1 in 3 people across the country have found it difficult to access services. Plans have been revealed to close almost every railway station ticket office in England. The Rail Delivery Group has unveiled a proposal which could lead to nearly all offices being shut down at hundreds of stations. Facilities will remain open at the busiest stations. Rail operators are under pressure from the government to save money amid a drop in revenue caused by the pandemic. Following a consultation, the government will have the final decision on which offices will be closed. Teachers in England have walked off the job for the 7th time this year in a row over pay, forcing schools to either close or restrict access to students. Union leaders have warned there'll be more strike action in the autumn if a deal can't be reached. Members of the National Education Union are also due to walk out this Friday. The King will be presented the Scottish Crown Jewels at a service in Edinburgh to mark the coronation. King Charles and Queen Camilla will be commemorated at St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh during the event, attended by leading public figures and members of a people's procession who will walk through the Scottish capital. The King will receive a crown, a sceptre and a sword made of gold, silver and gems, known collectively as the Honours of Scotland. Well, you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Well, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2714 and €1.1677. The price of gold is £1,516 and 28 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,481 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
And it's 10:36 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Brisbane-Turner. And to update you on our petition, our campaign, Don't Ditch Cash, we're now over 96,000 signatures. We get to the magic 100,000, we can then start pressing for a debate in the Commons, because MPs have not debated it and cash is disappearing fast without us knowing it.
Ring your mates. Ring your mates. If you just sat there at home now, think, do you know what, I'll ring my mum and I'll tell her to vote. I'll ring my best friend, or if you've got a WhatsApp group, if you're in a WhatsApp group, send out the link. gbnews.com is the link. It's dead easy on there. You click through, you put your name in, you sign it and you're done.
Yep, I've done it. You've done it.
I've done it, yep.
And Liam Halligan's here.
gbnews.com/cash.
Yeah.
Easy to remember. And that's the easiest. You can use that weird QR thing, QR code, but you need a smartphone for that.
Yeah.
Lots of GB News viewers and listeners are doing that.
Yeah.
But if you are just on the internet, you can use gbnews.com/cash. And we are getting a PO box too. So if people want to write in...
That's a very good
idea. And add to our petition. But incredible, we're 24 hours old and we're at 95,000. This is the power of...
96 now, Liam. 96,000.
We want to get to 100,000 while this programme is being aired.
While I'm talking.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you're here to talk to us about this breaking news about railway companies.
See, this is an example, what I'm about to say, of precisely why we are trying to save cash, because train operating companies across England, they've just announced proposals to close a huge number of ticket offices across the network, which means that people will have to rely on smartphones and apps and machines,
which are incredibly
cards
complicated,
to buy tickets. You know, a high proportion of British households haven't even got a bank account, they haven't even got debit cards. You can't use cash in almost all train ticket offices, machines now. I know that from my own commuting. I commute in pretty much every day. So let's have a look at what the train operating companies are actually proposing, guys. They're telling us, and this has literally just been released, that pre-pandemic, so in 2019, 24% of tickets were bought at ticket offices. That's now halved to just 12% of tickets bought at ticket offices. The rest, of course, bought online using apps and from machines.
But isn't that because a lot of the ticket offices have since closed?
Indeed. So it's like a circular argument.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Now, what they're saying is at the moment, 229 offices are staffed full-time. That's 17% of all ticket offices across the country, and 708 offices are staffed part-time. That's 40%. In other words, 57%, well over half, getting on for 2/3 of ticket offices, are currently staffed. And our understanding is that that's going to be cut to just
a handful. And why is this happening? This is happening because the train companies lost so much money during the pandemic. They kept running all those ghost trains. Trains, you know, you literally, I'd get on the train. I was able to travel around during the pandemic. I had a special licence as a journalist. I was making documentaries, making films. We were getting GB together, of course, in the really early days. So I used to commute in, and sometimes I'd literally have whole carriages to myself. I mean, it would have been cheaper to fly me into London by magic carpet, you know, than an actual train. So this is going to be a big deal, the fact that train ticket offices are going to close in no short order. And the Treasury seems to be backing this because they want to save money on public subsidy for our trains.
Isn't this going to be red rag to the bull to the rail unions who are still in dispute over, with drivers still striking? We've got train strikes coming up. The RMT, what's he called, that guy?
Mick Lynch.
Mick Lynch. Red rag to the bull.
The timing of this does seem a bit, you know, lacking in strategy.
Yeah. They don't care. They don't care, Liam. This is why this campaign is so important. Because cash isn't just about cash. The ripple effect of not having cash, like you say, jobs. You've got all those people who are currently sat in ticket offices. And I like the fact that there might be a person there, because if my daughter gets lost or gets into trouble or, needs some help...
And also, I know, I've been commuting in on the same line for 15, 20 years now, and I know the staff at my ticket office, and they are fantastic, professional people. You know, they're not doing the most difficult job in the world, but they're doing a really important job. And they'll say, oh, if you do it this way, it'll be cheaper for you. Oh, there's 4 of you, you can get a family ticket when you're going in at the weekend. That's really hard on an app. And let's just go back to this cash thing, because it's worth... Yeah, let's get over 100,000. Here are some interesting numbers on a graphic. You say that we haven't had many graphics lately, so in this studio spot, you're getting 2 whole graphics. So let's look at some of these numbers. These numbers are from UK Finance, which is a trade industry body. So we know that in 2012, if they can bring up the graphic...
We haven't got it.
60% of transactions in 2012 were still cash, right?
Yeah.
That's now around 30%. And we're going to end up with no cash by 2035.
We found it.
There
you go.
Look at that.
There you go. We're going to end up with no cash by 2035 or certainly less than 10%. And since 2018, 20% of ATMs, those holes in the walls, the teller machines, they have closed. So for many, many people, they're living in cash deserts, particularly older people who rely on cash. We are concerned because 5 million UK adults still rely wholly on cash. And when you think that there are 27 million households, that's a very high percentage. And that's why here on GB News, we are batting for those people.
Quite right.
We don't want surveillance capitalism. We don't want the lack of privacy that comes with removing cash. We don't want the vested interests, the businesses that want to, you know, forget their cash handling costs. We don't want them to win. This cash should be a universal right to use cash until 2050. That's what our petition says. So get online, gbnews.com/cash, and put your
Corner shop owners up and down the land will be cheering this campaign.
Absolutely.
98,000.
Come on, one more push.
Well done. We need 2,000 more and we'll reach that 100,000 whilst we're on air. You've got another hour and 20 minutes. I will be expecting that.
Absolutely. Liam, thanks for that. Now, a decision on whether the grave of the famous Dam Busters dog can be removed from RAF Scampton is expected later today.
So the dog served as the mascot for the legendary RAF squadron. It was buried on the former airbase at the request of its owner, but now the Home Office has plans to convert the base into a migrant camp.
Which is being, of course, opposed by just about everybody. Our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, has more.
If the courage of the Dam Busters men is the heart of their story, then their mascot dog is the soul. From flying with Wing Commander Guy Gibson to drinking beer with the men of 617 Squadron, the Black Labrador is synonymous with the Second World War raid. Now, 80 years on from his death, he's at the centre of a British controversy. With Scampton Airbase shut and asylum seekers incoming, the RAF says it can no longer protect the grave and its heritage. They want to dig up and remove any remains to RAF Marham in Norfolk, the current home of 617. Locals are furious. Sarah and Paul live next to RAF Scampton.
I mean, you don't live here without becoming attached to the
history of the base, do you? So, you know, knowing that part of that's gone, and a huge part of that has gone, would be quite upsetting.
He lived here, he died here, his grave's here. This is where he belongs.
For the people living here in Scampton, Guy Gibson's dog isn't just a part of the Dam Busters story, it's also a part of their story, and they feel that it's their job to preserve it in the same way that the RAF says that it does. Parts of the historic base have listed status, which covers the dog's grave. Any change to a protected building and its surroundings must go through the local council, in this case West Lindsey in Lincolnshire.
This is Hangar 1. Hangar 2 is the next one along, and at the front of Hangar 2 is where Guy Gibson's dog's buried.
Councillors like Roger are battling the Home Office to try and scrap a plan to put asylum seekers at the former base. He says if it happens, they can kiss goodbye to a £300 million heritage deal for Scampton.
The dog's grave is part of our heritage, but it's also part of our future, because the future here, if we get what we want with the £300 million deal, involves a world-class heritage centre, and the dog's grave is part of the story of 617 Squadron.
Hundreds of people have given feedback on the planning application. Historic England recommends refusing, as it would harm the significance of the wider site. Gibson's dog died when it was hit by a car just hours before the raid. The wing commander then hid the death from his men, fearing it could be seen as a bad omen. Buried overnight, he's been resting there ever since. The decision on removing him is expected tonight at a planning meeting badged as extraordinary. Will Hollis, GB News in Scampton.
Thank you, Will. Right, we are joined in the studio by former Labour MP Stephen Pound and political commentator Emma Webb. Stephen Pound, we need to come to you first with a name like that. Don't kill Cash. What do you make of our campaign?
Well, I thought it was a campaign against my old colleague Bill Cash at first. I said, nobody, you know, how would you tell? But yeah, no, it's a horrible. I tell you, one of the problems I have is I occasionally wander into licensed premises from time to time.
Do you?
And well, no, you know, I do purely in the interest of actually communing with the constituents as well. But you know, when you buy a drink in a pub, I always like to say, and have one for yourself.
Yes,
keep the change or something. And so I went into a pub the other day, mentioning no names, but the King's Arms in Hanwell, and they've actually got a separate little tip thing there. So you buy your drink with your card, and then you say, "Would you like to tap in £2?" And you know, and obviously the big issue people are doing it. No, it's so important because it disenfranchises people. The number of people who simply do not have credit cards.
Yeah.
And the other thing, of course, is credit cards nowadays. You start tapping in, they know everything about you.
They do.
And I actually think there's the anonymity of cash, but it's also the ability, the flexibility that it brings with you.
And it's also, if you're in the restaurant, you're tipping a waiter or waitress, then you know they keep the tip rather than the restaurant.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Because,
Emma, what do you think?
I didn't know about this until this morning. I will absolutely sign it and promote it to hell and high water. I think this is really important, and the main reason why I think so is because the situation that we're currently facing, with you've seen Nigel Farage's account being closed down, PayPal closing down the accounts of the Free Speech Union, the Daily Sceptic, so all sorts of people. Reverend recently having his account closed, and I think Barclays also just had to pay £20,000 to a Christian group because they had closed down their bank account as well. We are facing, with the cashless society plus the way that banks are behaving, we are facing a serious threat to our right to transact. And that fundamentally unpersons you. If you have your bank account closed and you live in a cashless society, you do not have the freedom and the ability to transact. It's about anonymity, but it's also about our ability to simply live.
Yeah, and choice.
So keeping cash is a fail-safe to make sure that we retain that right to transact regardless of the cashless society.
Breaking news.
Hey.
Breaking news. You did not let us down. We have hit 100,000 signatures during this show this morning. Well done, everybody.
Well
Round
done.
of applause. Well done,
Well
Stephen.
done, GB News viewers and listeners, because that is brilliant. And, of course, Stephen, you know, as a former MP, we can now start pushing with 100,000 signatures.
Well, of course,
you're
now entitled to a full debate in the House of Commons. How long did you just do
this?
this?
Is less than 48 hours. It was Patrick Christie's show day before yesterday, so 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon.
And when we came on at 9:30, it was on 86,000 so we've gone up 14,000.
I think you also mentioned Patrick Christys. I think we should actually give him credit for also his fundraising for Mind.
Absolutely.
I think they closed the doors on that last night, and they raised an incredible sum of money.
He's a great guy, Patrick.
I mean, GB News is leading the debate now, isn't it?
Well, we are. That's what we're meant to be doing, isn't it?
I know it's what you're meant to be doing, but you're actually doing it.
We are, and we're getting more viewers than our rivals.
We are. We're doing well.
You accepted the principle of rivals.
Well, yes, we do.
We are the pretenders to the throne, of course, but we're now on
you're the
throne.
young upstarts.
That's exactly what we are. That's exactly what we are.
But I think that the reason it's so important, we've just discussed it, there are so many implications, Emma, aren't there, of a cashless society. It's not just about those who are disenfranchised, that is incredibly important, but it will affect everybody in the fullness of time. It's very easy to sit there and say, well, I'm all right, Jack, I've got a bank account, I can, what's wrong with these Luddites? Well, just be careful.
Well, one serious thing is...
the future that...
a petrol station round my way has cloned people's credit cards 3 times now.
Yeah.
The number of people, they go in there and the petrol station says you've got to pay that, and next thing you know, great sums of money being drafted. Now, OK, in some cases the banks will pay the money back, but the potential for fraud with credit cards is vastly... The potential for fraud with a £5 note is pretty minimal.
Yeah. I tell you who else would be cheering this campaign, taxi drivers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they are wide awake. The taxi drivers know what's going on because they are feeling it every day. I paid for cash going home in a cab the other night, and it inspired this conversation.
Yeah.
In the report that I was reading just before we came in here, one of the groups of people that this would help are old people who are trying to pay for parking.
Yes.
Who might just get a ticket because you now have to do everything on an app.
Terrible.
And it's not just paying for parking. It's all sorts of different things now that you used to be able to use cash for, but you can't.
Yeah.
And there are implications if you don't. You have to pay by phone. But what if you don't have a smartphone? Why should you have to have a smartphone in order to get by?
So complicated, haven't they?
It's also very interesting. I don't know if you know this. In America, the dollar bills are all the same size.
Right.
And so people who have problems can't differentiate between a $10 bill and a $50 bill.
Sure.
All the British currency is differently shaped.
That's right.
So that you can actually tell by touch what size it is and what shape it is and what value it is.
Yeah.
We've put some thought into this.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's keep it.
Good. All your £50 notes that you've always got in your wallet, Steve, and they're...
Well, they're bigger.
Yes.
I mean,
your
I've seen pictures of them.
Yes.
I want to just bring our viewers at home into this discussion because you've been very busy this morning getting in touch. Jeff in Leicester has said, out here in the real world, away from the central London bubble, where 95% of us live and work, cash and cards are used absolutely everywhere, except car parking machines, because miscreants keep stealing the cash from those. The answer in London is to stop using businesses that won't take cash if it worries you that much. There is some truth in that, but also, Jeff, we need to be talking about it. No other channels, Emma, are having these discussions. That's what I find so strange. When I was doing all the panel stuff on those inferior TV channels, this would be one of those topics that you would talk about in the paper review, but no one's talking about it.
I think we've actually got to the point now where, so if you're talking about not using businesses that have gone completely cashless, we have seen such an increase in companies. I won't name any, but there are particular ones in central London chains that have gone completely cashless.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, if we get to a point where even just in London alone, even if it's not in urban areas or in the countryside, if we get to a point where more and more companies have gone cashless, it becomes increasingly difficult for us to vote with our wallets in order to use cash. And because we've not been having this conversation, things have got worse and worse. We actually are at the point now, I think, where we need to have, and the Treasury did intervene on this with the bank accounts being closed. I think we need to see the Treasury, we need to see the government intervening to make sure that citizens' right to transact is protected, permanently protected.
And Rishi Sunak was challenged about this in the Commons last week, or I think it was last week, and he was equivocal, to say the least.
There is a way to use purchaser power, and I'm not suggesting this because it's outrageous, but may I suggest that one of these places that you know and I both... You go in there, you order 15 coffee frappuccinos, and then say, oh, cash, and they say, oh, no, it's card only. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's a bit mischievous, Steve. You see, there's no way. There's no way Rishi Sunak will back this campaign. So sorry about that.
He might if you think there's votes in it.
But this is my point. We are showing you, Rishi Sunak, what the people want.
Realist.
We will help you to work this stuff out because most people are not technocrats. They're not involved in the central banking digital currency. They're not a big fan of digital ID where you can police everything. So welcome to the real world, Rishi Sunak, courtesy of GB News.
He'll focus group it. He doesn't need to focus group it because he's seen seen how quickly we voted for this. 100,000 in not
That's
even 48 hours.
100,000, we have done it, well done. Don't
It's
feel
a vote
cash,
winner.
but keep your votes coming. The higher that gets, the more likely they are to debate it in Parliament. Right, still to come, does the NHS need a shake-up? Yes, it does.
And we're
be
also
debating
going to be
that.
talking about that extraordinary story about, remember, Captain Tom? A big story which we'll bring you later in the programme.
Right, we are GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. A mixture of sunshine and showers today. A fresh breeze out there as well. Some heat is on the way for some of us later this week. We've seen this low pressure system, a little vicious one that brought a lot of wet weather across the eastern areas through the night, bringing some very strong winds to the Netherlands at the moment. But behind it, things are a little calmer. Quite a bit of cloud around earlier, but we'll see some sunny spells breaking through. A few showers moving through on the breeze. Plenty of them across northern Scotland, through Northern Ireland, parts of Wales, but they will tend to zip through, and some parts of the south will stay completely dry this afternoon. A bit of brightness as well. Temperatures close to, maybe a touch below average, feeling a little fresh maybe in the breeze, but pleasant enough when the sun pops out. Now, as we go through this evening, still a few scattered showers around, but generally they tend to fade as we head towards midnight, so most places becoming dry through this evening and staying dry through the second half of the night. Always some showers coming into western Scotland and a few more developing across the west of Northern Ireland by dawn. A coolish night, actually. Temperatures well down into single figures in rural areas, could be as low as 2 or 3 degrees in some spots. So yes, a fresh start to Thursday. For much of England and Wales, it'll be a fine, bright day with a bit more sunshine maybe than today. A few showers for southern Scotland, northwest England initially, and later on we'll see some rain working into Northern Ireland. The breeze picking up here once more. That rain will eventually work along the west coast of Scotland too. But as I said, for many, it's a dry, bright day. A bit warmer than today as well. The wind's a little lighter, so feeling quite pleasant with temperatures mostly into the low 20s. But the wet weather will push into Northern Ireland, then into western parts of Scotland. The breeze picking up and introduce a few more showers during the evening over the north and the west of Wales. That's an area of low pressure, but with the winds coming up from the south, that will also bring some warmth with it. So some hot sunshine across eastern areas in particular on Friday before things turn a bit more mixed through the weekend.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 11 a.m. on Wednesday, the 5th of July. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Don't kill cash. The People's Channel petition to save the physical pound in your pocket. You've done it. We have hit over 102,000 signatures in 2 days. Sign up at our website. Let's keep that number rising. gbnews.com/cash.
And it's an important number because when you reach 100,000, you can start pushing for a debate in the Commons. Now, happy birthday to the NHS. It's 75 years old today. We'll be taking a close look at the NHS throughout the show. Is it still fit for purpose?
Send us your stories and a sad health story concerning the legendary TV broadcaster Fiona Phillips. She has revealed that she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. She is only 62 years of age. She says that she's trialling a new drug which may slow or reverse the condition. We wish you all the very best from GB News.
Yeah, she's a great woman, she really is. And Scotland today is marking the coronation of the King and Queen with a service of thanksgiving at St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh. Stay tuned to GB News, bring you all the latest throughout the day. I think incredibly brave of Fiona Phillips. She's given an interview to the Daily Mirror where she's been a columnist for years, telling us that at 60 she was diagnosed with Alzheimer. She thought she'd got problems with the menopause, being forgetful, brain fog, because her parents died of it and she nursed her own parents with it.
Let us know your stories, particularly of that condition as well, won't you? Because it affects everybody, doesn't it? The whole family. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. Lots more as well this morning. But first of all, here is your news with Tamsin Roberts.
Bev, thanks very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's 2 minutes past 11. As the NHS celebrates its 75th anniversary, Labour is warning the service will die without further investment and modernisation. Around 7.4 million people are on NHS waiting lists, and the government has acknowledged the figure could get worse before it gets better. It comes as a YouGov poll shows 1 in 3 people across the country have found it difficult to access services. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the NHS is facing the worst crisis in its history, and people who can't afford to go private are being left behind.
Deeply angry about the two-tier system we have in our country today, where those who can afford it are paying to go private and those who can't afford it are being left behind. And my answer would be, in the short term, where there is spare capacity in the private sector, we should be paying for it on NHS terms so that people who can't afford it are getting it free at the point of use. That would be my answer. I've got no objection to using private sector capacity to get NHS waiting lists down faster.
Well, Health Minister Maria Caulfield, who is also a nurse, says strike action is putting more pressure on the service.
Although we've got more people on the waiting list, the waiting times are coming down. And I think for most people who are waiting for an operation or a procedure, it's how long they wait, not who else is on that waiting list. And we've eliminated the 2-year wait. We've virtually eliminated the 18-month wait. And we're now working on those who are waiting for a year. So it's really important that we do that. And strike action doesn't help, to be honest. It does mean that procedures and operations are often cancelled. So that's why we do want the unions to come around the table and try and resolve that for patients.
Meanwhile, the Prince and Princess of Wales surprised NHS staff by dropping in for a tea party at a hospital in London. William and Kate helped lay tables at a reception at St Thomas's Hospital to celebrate the NHS's 75th anniversary. The royals met guests including Anira Thomas, the first baby born on the NHS, named after the Health Service's founder, Anira Bevan. It was hosted by NHS Charities Together, for which the Prince and Princess are patrons. Plans have been revealed to close almost every railway station ticket office in England. The Rail Delivery Group has unveiled a proposal which could lead to nearly all offices being shut down at hundreds of stations. Facilities will remain open at the busiest stations. Rail operators are under pressure from the government to save money amid a drop in revenue caused by the pandemic. Following a consultation, the government will have the final decision on which offices will be closed. Schools across England have been forced to close or restrict access to students, with teachers walking off the job in a row over pay. It's their 7th strike this year, and unions have warned there'll be more action in the autumn if a deal can't be reached. As well as lessons, end-of-term events like school trips and sports days are also being disrupted. Birmingham teacher Leslie Quinlan says both staff and students deserve better.
Government aren't listening, and we're going to keep doing this until they do. We need to have a fully funded education system in this country. These children deserve so much better than this. What this government is happening, what it's doing to them. It's been going on for way too many years. We need to put a stop to it now and fund their education.
Faith leaders are calling for a just and compassionate asylum policy. The Archbishops of Canterbury and York have renewed their calls for the government to change its illegal migration bill in a letter to the Times newspaper. The intervention comes ahead of the final report stage debate on the bill in the House of Lords today. The Archbishop of Canterbury is proposing an amendment and is calling on the government to develop a long-term strategy to combat the refugee crisis and human trafficking. The King will be presented the Scottish Crown Jewels at a service in Edinburgh to mark the coronation. King Charles and Queen Camilla will be commemorated at St Giles Cathedral during the event attended by leading public figures and members of a people's procession who will walk through the Scottish capital. The King will receive a crown, a sceptre and a sword made of gold, silver and gems, known collectively as the Honours of Scotland. This is GB News. More headlines from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Bev.
The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, has called for evolution, not revolution, when it comes to the NHS, as it turns 75 today.
He's been writing in the Times, as one of his predecessors has called for a royal commission to look into the whole way the NHS is operated, but Number 10 seem to have ruled that out already.
That's right. The three main health think tanks have warned that the NHS won't make it to its 100th birthday without support.
Well, let's cross now to our reporter, Jack Carson, who's in the hometown of the Labour politician Anira Bevan, who's behind the creation of the NHS. Over to you. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, we're here in Tredegar at the office, the original office of the Tredegar Workmen's Medical Aid Society. This idea of this society is the foundation, really, of the NHS when Bevan became Health Minister. This is the idea that he took to, of course, take that white paper into that official government policy. We're here with Alan Terrell from it. Alan, tell us about the history of Anira Bevan and his importance to this town.
Good morning. Well, Anira Bevan was very much a man of the people right from very early on. At the age of 19, he'd already become head of his local miners' lodge and was actively trying to promote workers' rights, fair pay, and was very much a thorn in the side of the local iron company, because he believed that everybody should have the right to fair work, fair wage, and obviously the access to health care as well. So the Tredegar Medical Aid Society would have been very close to his heart.
Yeah, and talk to us about how he took that model of the society to make it and to make it kind of into the NHS when it was founded.
So his friend Walter Conway was General Secretary of the Medical Aid Society, and under his leadership he managed to get 20,000 people to subscribe to the service by just paying a sort of a few pence a week or a month. And Aneurin Bevan obviously saw this model running quite effectively for about 10 years. So when he was asked to construct the NHS, he knew sort of that the system would work. And as we know, he proudly stood up in Parliament and said, "We will Tredegarise you," because he knew the system had been functioning in Tredegar quite well for over 10 years.
Yeah, and kind of take us into a bit more detail about the society itself. So it had, was it 20,000 members at one point?
Yeah, so the society was formed by a number of like-minded societies coming together in 1890. And from then on, it slowly grew. And then obviously Walter Conway was appointed General Secretary. And he was known as being a very gentlemanly man, very patient, and was, again, another man of the people. And under his leadership, it grew to 20,000 members. So obviously it was a need that the town desperately wanted. In order to get any medical aid before that, you had to get a doctor all the way in from Abergavenny. So, the Medical Aid Society came in with this wonderful system, built surgeries, a cottage hospital, and provided doctors, dentists, and other medical professionals as and when needed.
Yeah, this place has so much history, as you've been telling me this morning. But it was actually the NHS in a way which was the downfall for this place, because that healthcare at free of the point of use took the need away for this society, for these people.
Sadly, yes, it was kind of sort of the forerunner of the NHS. Actually, then became sort of defunct, as it were, and within about 2 years memberships dropped off, and we actually have the last ledger book here, and around about 1950 that's the last entry and the last couple of people that are actually sort of still paying, and yeah, they wrapped up the society then.
All right, Alan, thank you so much for joining us here this morning on GB News. Well, there you are. That's a quick tour of the history of the NHS from here in Tredegar.
All right, Jack, thanks so much. That's Jack Carson in Tredegar, hometown of Aneurin Bevan. And interesting, Bev, he was the health secretary who pioneered the NHS. He quit in protest at prescription charges being introduced because he said that breaches the fundamental principle of being free at the point of delivery.
I love that.
And, of course, we're still paying for prescription charges. And, actually, we've paid, most of us, to go to the dentist too.
He'd be turning in his grave now, wouldn't he,
because,
with how much we pay
I mean,
for.
that is privatisation by stealth, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who's got an NHS dentist.
I don't.
No.
I don't. The most common cause of children being hospitalised now is for teeth extraction.
Terrible.
That's how bad it is.
Yeah, and it's expensive, but
Yeah.
again, Tony Blair, of course, saying today, writing an article, Sir Tony, as we should call him now, saying that there should be more use of private sector operators, which
And
is always
apps.
contentious. And apps, of
And
course.
tech.
Yes, and if you're 85 and watching this, in fact, I was talking to one of our viewers who's 96, Brian, and he doesn't have apps on his phone, so there wouldn't be much good to him.
It's hopeless. Right, teachers are striking again this week as part of an ongoing dispute over pay and funding.
It's the National Education Union, which is the largest teachers' union. They're campaigning for a fully funded, above-inflation pay rise. Remember, inflation is currently at 8.7%, and they're also striking, they say, to raise awareness about a lack of funding in schools.
So Christine Cunliffe now joins us, head teacher at LVS Ascot. Good morning, Christine. This is a busy time of the year for teachers. It's the last few weeks of term. You've got sports days, you've got summer fairs, you've got concerts going on, assemblies, prize givings. What a terrible time for teachers to disrupt the curriculum and the week for the kids.
Oh, it is busy. I managed just to get here by the skin of my teeth, actually, because I was in a prize-giving ceremony for our youngsters today. But it's tragic, and it's not that I don't have sympathy for teachers' pay. I really don't. But we need to be in school for the children, and also parents need to go to work as well. But I do think, striking is just putting a plaster over the fundamental issues we have with education. Now, I saw on the news earlier this morning with Eamon and Isabel that they were talking about the NHS, and maybe that model has broken now. It's served a fabulous process. It does an amazing job, but things have to change. And I do think that teaching is in the same thing. Schools need to be fully funded to be able to pay teachers the salaries which they can command. And we know what that recruitment crisis is looking at right now, especially as maths and science teachers. So is it time to strike, or is it time that we put pressure on the government to change the way we do things? Give head teachers a budget to be able to pay their staff what they deserve to be paid, and to be able to deliver the first-class education to every child in this country, and not just the chosen few or the area that you live in. It's time for change, and it's not time for striking. It's time for us to call for reform in education.
Christine, how difficult is it now for you to recruit teachers? You mentioned mathematics teachers, for instance. Is it a problem?
It's a huge problem. And, you know, in our school, we're an independent school, so our budgets are good. But even the area that we live in, it's very expensive to live, the cost of living. You know, we are really having to be competitive. And I think, you know, with us as an independent, we have to run our budgets like the state school do. And we're having to plough money, more and more money in, to be able to attract the right teachers into our school to deliver the education. Now, that shouldn't be the case. In the state sector, and I've worked there previously for 10 years before independent education, schools should be given the right amount of money to attract the right people. Now, above inflation pay rises, the government, you know, really can't afford that. We've just come out of COVID. We're having to repair our country. But maybe now, you know, I implore the government to take a look at the structure of what we do and how we pay people. Because in that mix as well, there's also the pension issues. And maybe we should be offering our teachers packages so that they can choose, you know, what they invest into for the future, where they decide to teach, and how much money they earn. Because if I was a maths graduate right now, I would be attracted to the city where the money's much more.
Yeah, you use the word the government can't afford to pay, but we have to remember, don't we, here, it's not the government, it's the taxpayer, it's all of us. That if they give a whacking above inflation pay rise, that's coming out of the ever diminishing pool of tax.
But also, you just mentioned that, you know, how many of us have got a dentist, an NHS dentist now? Right. We don't have it. How many parents are having to pay for education now, and we're already paying our taxes? So where is the fairness in that? Why are there not tax relief that people can make real choices about where they are educated, where they get their care from? And, you know, we can't just live in this idealistic society of freedom. You know, we need to change. You might be able to tell I'm a little bit uptight about this because I hate seeing children out of school. I hate teachers not being paid what they're due to be paid, but I know what the pressures are, but those pressures can be alleviated by real reform within our education system.
Why now, do you think? Why now are teachers so keen? Is it just about the cost of living that they're finding it hard to make ends meet on their existing salary? Or is there something else going on about the psychology of public sector workers who feel that they just deserve more?
No, I don't think it's that people feel they deserve more. I really don't think that. But I think teachers give far more above than their contracts. You know, contracts in our school, for example, are 8:30 to 4 o'clock. I can tell you that our teachers work in 10, 12 hours a day. We emotionally invest into education to provide for our children. And sometimes it might feel that the teachers maybe are the forgotten ones. People will soon tell us how much holiday we get, or we only work certain hours, or this, that and the other. But being a teacher is hard graft, I can tell you. 30 years of experience, I'm covering up my grey hair.
Well, you look fabulous to us. Yeah, you know, we all, and the head teacher of any school is the most important role. With good leadership, you get good teachers, good pupils. The parents will cooperate with you, which, let's face it, is not always easy.
No, it's not easy. And we've got to remember, children come first.
Yeah.
And if we get it right for them, they are our future. And that's what we have to invest in. And, you know, come on, government. Let's get going. Let's reform what we do, hey? And appreciate us all.
I wish you'd been my head teacher, Christine, because my...
Well, you're very welcome.
Yeah, my head teacher was a rather difficult man, particularly when the belt was around. Christine, thanks for joining us. That's Christine Cunniff, who's head teacher at LVS Ascot. I used to get the belt at school.
Did you?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
He used to put a piece of chalk on the desk, and then he'd get out this big belt, and then he'd whack chalk, and the chalk would be crushed, and you think, oh, that's just demonstrating what's... And then stick your hand out.
What kind of things did you do to get...
I remember once it was throwing snowballs.
Throwing snowballs?
Yeah.
And where would they hit you on the hand?
Yeah, both of them. Yeah. In fact, I joined up with some schoolmates just a few weeks ago, 10 of us, and we were all talking about how often we got the belt, the boys.
See, I'm very torn about that because I know, like, kids just run absolute riot in schools now. They just think...
I'm going to use that expression. Didn't do me any harm, did it?
No. Well, did it?
Well, I don't think it did. I didn't feel abused, a battered child. And if I went home and told my mum I got the belt, she said, you probably deserved it.
Oh, that's not how it is now. If you go in now and it's poor teachers, if they say your child's done something wrong, the parents commonly will say, well, what have you done to my child to make them do something wrong? It's a difficult job.
Yeah. The plates have shifted.
Discipline, boundaries, good old-fashioned... you know, punishments, possibly not beating them up with a ruler.
No, well, it was belt, very thick belt. And the nuns used to use the ruler, but with the side of it, hit with the side of the ruler. That always hurt. Still to come, we'll be speaking to our Aurora reporter Cameron Walker, who's in Edinburgh. King Charles and Queen Camilla mark their coronation during Holy Rood Week in Edinburgh.
That's right. You are with Britain's Newsroom. We're very glad to have you on GB News, Britain's news channel. First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 11:23. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner, and more breaking news and good news. Guess what we're on now for our petition to don't ditch cash? 104,000. When we came on air at 9:30, we were on 86,000. So thank you and well done, and keep signing, because the more signatures we get, the more likely it is that we can trigger a debate on the floor of the Houses of Parliament. They've never had a debate about ditching cash before, so
And they
GB News
need to.
can force them.
They need to have that conversation. We all need to be having that conversation around all of our dinner tables at home. Every time you stood in a bus stop queue, talk to somebody about the threat of getting rid of cash and what it will mean for all of our lives.
If you go on the GB News website, you'll find how to do it. It's really, really easy.
Yeah.
gbnews.com/cash. There we are. Sign it, and let's get up to 110,000.
Right, Scotland are having a big week. They're marking the coronation of King Charles III with a ceremony at St Giles's Cathedral in Edinburgh.
He's going to be presented with the crown jewels of Scotland, which are the most historic in the United Kingdom, in fact, probably in the whole of Europe. The proceedings are also going to include a new ceremonial sword named after the late Queen Elizabeth II.
So let's speak again to GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker, who joins us now from Edinburgh. The sun is still shining up there, Cameron. What's the mood like there today?
He's got a tartan tie on.
I do have a tartan tie on. Thanks for noticing, Andrew. Yes, it's a bit of a mix, actually. I walked down the Royal Mile a little bit earlier, and already, despite the fact we're a couple of hours away from processions kicking off, there is a large presence down there from both pro-monarchists and anti-monarchists. I spoke to the leader of Republic, Graham Smith, the anti-monarchy group with the big yellow signs. He was saying he's expecting around 300 people at his protest, which is just opposite St Giles Cathedral, where the service of Thanksgiving is going to be taking place later on, where the King will be presented with the honours of Scotland, the crown, the sceptre and the brand new sword named after Queen Elizabeth II. 5 foot long, 7.5 kilograms in weight. That's going to be carried by Dame Catherine Granger, the former Olympic gold medalist. But before that takes place, we have two big processions. We have the People's Procession from Edinburgh Castle, representatives from various organisations across Scotland, including NHS Scotland, celebrating their 75th anniversary today, and the Prince's Trust, that's the King's former charity which he set up when he was Prince of Wales. There's also going to be 700 military personnel processing down the Royal Mile from the Royal Air Force, British Army and Royal Navy as well, and they are going to be led by a Shetland pony mascot of the Royal Regiment of Scotland. There will be a tri-service guard of honour greeting the King, the Queen and the Prince and Princess of Wales, known as the Duke and Duchess of Rothesay in Scotland. They're going to be greeted at the Palace of Holyrood House, and then they are going to be taken up to St Giles Cathedral as well. Then, of course, we have the service. Different dignitaries are going to be there. And then there's going to be a 21-gun salute at Edinburgh Castle, followed by, weather permitting, but it looks like we are definitely going to have this by the looks of this weather. The red arrows are going to be flying over Edinburgh Castle behind me, down the Royal Mile and over the Palace of Holyrood House as well. It's the first kind of celebration of this kind since 1953. That was the last time a monarch was presented with the honours of Scotland, which was Queen Elizabeth II. So it doesn't happen very often at all. But as you said, Andrew, and your link there, they are a lot older, the crown jewels, than that.
Cameron, that was lovely. That's Cameron Walker.
I think we've got a picture of you in a kilt, Cameron.
Yes, let's see it.
Oh, wow. Looking lovely.
And Cameron, you know what I'm going to ask you?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Did you do it the traditional Scottish way, or did you not do it the traditional Scottish way with your kilt?
No comments, Andrew, but I can tell you that it was the Stuart of Appin. It was the Stuart of Appin tartan. That's my the clan. I'm half Scottish, so
right.
Yeah, Stuart of Appin.
I think you're blushing.
I think you're on the west coast.
I think you're blushing.
Well, it's just very hot here, Andrew. There's lots of sun. It's summer. What do you expect?
Brilliant. Yeah, very good. Cameron, great to talk to you.
Thank you.
And Cameron alluded to the supporters.
Yeah.
There are supporters, but of course there are also protesters who are gathering on the Royal Mile. Our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire, joins us live. Tony, morning. Are they making a lot of noise, these protesters?
Yeah, well, certainly we got in to speak with Graham Smith, leader of the Republic, quite early this morning, and he did say, as Cameron mentioned there, he was hopeful of a few hundred protesters, and that's one of two rather large protests expected today, the other one being down at Holyrood, the Scottish Parliament. Now, that protest held by our Republic is going to be joined by co-leader of the Scottish Greens, Patrick Harvie. That is expected to be another reasonably sized turnout, and certainly this morning, despite it being so early, certainly Graham Smith was quite positive about the way things were going. I asked him about his message that he was going to be sending across today and what the wind is like in the sails of the Republic machine.
Yeah, I mean, support for Republic has boomed, and support for the monarchy has dropped sharply across the UK from sort of highs of 75% down to 55%, 52% on one poll. And I think one thing that we want to do is concentrate more in Scotland, because I think that's where we can push the whole UK number down below 50%. If the monarchy support goes down below 50%, then they no longer have any claim at all to legitimacy or public support. So that's game over for them.
And behind me, you can actually see probably just the bottom of a statue of Adam Smith. Adam Smith, of course, the father of Scottish Enlightenment, in the period where different groups of society who shared different views came together in a form of kind of sharing their perspectives and celebrating their differences. Well, today is a lot like that here in the Royal Mile. I'm joined with protesters, monarchists, and just a lot of people here who are actually just quite out to see this moment in history, to say I was there, and what a day they have to do it. The weather is good considering how absolutely atrocious it was yesterday, and certainly we've got the parade from the Red Arrows, we've got the lovable appearance of Corporal Cruiken, the little Shetland pony mascot. Here's hoping he's on his best behaviour today. He's been known to bite the hand of Prince Harry and also go to the toilet when it's not the best possible time during a photo op with the late Majesty the Queen. So lots happening today. Good atmosphere in Edinburgh, irrespective of what side of the fence you sit on.
All right, that's Tony Maguire, our Scotland reporter. You know who's going to be
Tony.
at the service, of course? Hamza Yousaf, who's the First Minister, who is an ardent Republican.
Oh, awkward.
Ardent.
We've been talking about our campaign all morning, Don't Kill Cash. And Nadia has said, thank you, Nadia, if we go cashless, what happens if your identity is stolen and you cannot do anything at all? It's time the government opened a bank. Oh, I don't know about that. Just look at what happened to Nigel Farage. Nobody can function without a bank account. The government needs to act now.
And look at this from Bernie and Gail from the Isle of Wight, which is one of both of us. We both like the Isle of Wight very much, and that's where my 96-year-old viewer's from, Brian. We have both signed your petition, but have a question. Keeping cash is mainly for oldies like us. I'm not an oldie. I use cash all the time. How are those without a smartphone or computer going to sign? We're getting our own P.O. box, Bernie and Gail, so you'll be able to send in your form. These are the ones you need to target. You need a telephone number, which is free or cheap. Regards, Gail and Bernie, dinosaurs from the Isle of Wight.
Well,
we like dinosaurs.
You might be in the Black Gang China if you're a dinosaur on the Isle of Wight. And we know it's a good show when my mum texts in and she said, I bet you and Andrew have got no bank account by midnight. You need to be careful.
Yeah, because the banks do not want cash to stick
She's normally
around.
right, my mum. Right, still to come. The Captain Tom Foundation, remember him? It has stopped receiving donations as the council orders a building that they built to be demolished. It was a spa pool, the kind of thing you have when you run a charity. All that after your morning news.
Beth, thanks very much. Here are the headlines at 11:31. As the NHS celebrates its 75th anniversary, Labour is warning the service will die without further investment and modernisation. Around 7.4 million people are on NHS waiting lists, and the government has acknowledged the figure could get worse before it gets better. It comes as a YouGov poll shows 1 in 3 people across the country have found it difficult to access services. Plans have been revealed to close almost every railway station ticket office in England. The Rail Delivery Group has unveiled a proposal which could lead to nearly all offices being shut down at hundreds of stations. Facilities are expected to remain open at the busiest stations. Teachers in England have walked off the job for the 7th time this year in a row over pay, forcing schools to either close or restrict access to students. Union leaders have warned there'll be more strike action in the autumn if a deal can't be reached. Members of the National Education Union are also due to walk out this Friday. The King will be presented the Scottish Crown Jewels at a service in Edinburgh to mark the coronation. King Charles and Queen Camilla will be commemorated at St Giles Cathedral, with hundreds of people marching through the city ahead of the ceremony. The King will receive a crown, a sceptre and a sword made of gold, silver and gems, known collectively as the Honours of Scotland. You can get more on all of those stories. Just visit our website, gbnews.com. Now back.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
And it's 11:37. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, journalist and television presenter Fiona Phillips has revealed that she's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.
She's only 62 and she was diagnosed 18 months ago. She'd had months of brain fog and anxiety. She thought it was something to do with the menopause, but sadly, it's the same condition her parents had. She's on a trial for a new drug which scientists hope could slow or even reverse the illness in years to come.
Yeah, well, let's speak now to Sunday Express Health and Social Affairs editor Lucy Johnston. Lucy, good to see you. It's increasingly common, isn't it, as a disease, Alzheimer's, and the implications for the whole family are enormous.
It's devastating news for her, and it seems as if, in her case, very unusually, her condition is hereditary. Both her parents died of the condition, and so that means that, unfortunately for her, there are less environmental factors that may be affecting her condition, and so less that she can do about it. Although, as you've said, there is a new drug that's being trialled, and that is a completely brand new approach to treating the condition, and one hopes that maybe this may help find some pathway to improvements at least, although it's very uncertain yet, and also uncertain whether she'll be on the actual drug, or because it's a trial, she may be on the dummy drug.
A lot of people think, Lucy, it is hereditary, and I just have to think about my own family. My father had it. He was one of 5 children, and 3 of them had dementia, and his own father had dementia too. But it isn't necessarily genetic, is it?
No, for her, she's only 62 and both her parents had it, so the likelihood is that it is genetic for her. It is a disease that is associated with aging, and most people develop it when they're older. It's a sort of syndrome, it's a collection of diseases, and actually we don't really know the cause of it. We know that it's linked to smoking, it's linked to lack of exercise, it's linked to loneliness, it's linked to diet. And in fact, in Sweden, their memory clinics actually test people for signs of low B vitamins, and if people are found to have low levels of, or something that is a marker for low B vitamins, they're given a prescription of drugs or of supplements to help improve their B vitamin intake, and also fish oils. So this is really where we need to be looking, I think. By the time you've developed Alzheimer's or any form of dementia, it's rather late to be trying to get onto it and to reverse the symptoms. Your decline in memory is, a decline in memory shows that your brain has already sort of shot. But if you can start getting prevention early, and this is where the government really needs to focus, we can perhaps stave off thousands and millions of early deaths and disease from the condition. Because in fact, by 2040, we're going to see we have almost 1 million people with dementia now. This is likely to rise to nearly over 1.5 million. So we're facing a tsunami, and our social care system really isn't up for it. It's teetering on the verge of collapse as it is. So it's a real worry.
She's so young, Lucy, isn't she, Fiona Phillips, to have this diagnosis at 60. We traditionally think of Alzheimer's as being, and to some extent, fortunately, it is still a condition that will affect the elderly much more than the young. Do you have any idea if it is becoming more common in young people, and what might explain that when you said about the environmental factors?
Yeah, I don't think there's any evidence that it's becoming more common in young people. I don't know of that, but it is becoming more common across the board. So we really are seeing a time bomb. We will see by 2035, 2/3 of over 65s will be living with some form of some condition or another, mostly mental health problems and Alzheimer's. So we really need to think about that in the healthcare system. So this will affect, we haven't got enough places in care homes for people. It affects people, they can't stay in hospital to be looked after, and often that will need 24-hour care. So we really need to think about how we will tackle this and how the country will look, how we will cope with this, because it is a huge time bomb that's going to affect all of us. And our tax bill, is already, we're paying 10% of our taxes goes towards healthcare. How will this be reflected in the future? Because things are only going to get more difficult for us if we've got this ageing and growing population.
Fascinating,
right.
Lucy. Thank you. Lucy Johnston there, the Daily Express, Sunday Express, Health and Social
I've known
Affairs.
Fiona for years. She's such a nice woman. She's such a dynamo, bright, clever, vibrant. She worked so hard with her parents to raise awareness of Alzheimer's. And in the interview she's given in the Mirror today, where she was a columnist, she said, "And now it's come for me." A chilling phrase.
Isn't it?
And she thought she might get it, but she thought she'd be 80. Stephen, she's only 62, and she's already had it for 18 months.
It's no age at all. I mean, the one sort of chink of light and hope here is that medical advances are extraordinary in this area. And I also think that you used to say that you couldn't have a prevention against Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
There are certain indicators now that they're realising. It's not always about smoking, it's not always about exercise, but I think we're actually narrowing it down a little bit now to get the early indications of it. But there's some hope, I think.
That was so interesting what Lucy was saying about loneliness can play a part in cognitive decline, I suppose, in the elderly.
You're not talking to anybody.
Yeah,
well, it's the use it or lose it thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I mean, I seem to remember you used to do crosswords and things. You used to do these brain teasers and things. And I think that's an important thing. It is use it or lose it. You've got to keep your brain sharp.
Yeah, well,
watch
still
TV
working hard. Now, Captain Tom Moore, we've talked about this in the programme. Tell us about this story, Emma.
Extraordinary story. So the daughter of Captain Tom had put in a request to the council to build this L-shaped property, built a C-shaped property instead, put in a pool and a spa. The Charity Commission is now investigating the foundation. The foundation says that even though his daughter put in this planning application, which was in the name of her and her husband, it made reference to the foundation. The charity says that it wasn't aware that this had been made with any connection to the name of the foundation. And now they have been asked by the council to demolish the spa, really, that she'd created. And one of the comments online was that Captain Tom had done laps around his garden so that she could do laps around her pool. So
cruel,
but yes, exactly. And you know, something fishy does seem to be going on here, and I don't want to jump to conclusions because they are investigating what's happened. There's nothing to suggest that the foundation has done anything wrong. They are putting all of their effort into complying with the Charity Commission's inquiry. They are not taking any more donations, and the foundation, also importantly, is separate to the millions that were donated to Captain Tom that then went to the NHS.
Yeah.
So the foundation is a separate thing. This is obviously quite a complicated story around planning permission.
Why did the foundation need a spa and pool?
Well, so it seems that the foundation didn't know that this building was being built in Captain Tom's name on that land. There are also some questions about a company connected to the daughter trademarking Captain Tom's name and things like this. So it's quite a complicated story. But what it does seem like, without jumping to conclusions, it appears that she's sort of profiting or at least using her father's name in a way that I think many of us would think is unacceptable and possibly a bit cheap.
I don't know whether you can see this. We've got the this is the family home here. This is the family home here, and then this is their rather significant, as Emma said, a kind of C-shaped swimming pool block there. I mean, this is the family home.
And let's be honest, it's very ugly. The neighbours are not happy about it. They've put in objections because they've built a building that is larger, and apparently its foundations were, you know, they noticed the foundations are deeper and everything. So they've built something that they don't have planning permission for, and it's an eyesore for the local people.
And the council would not have approved that because it's so hideous.
Yeah,
I think
apart from anything else.
It's hardly the vernacular of the area.
Look, I'll tell you the real tragedy of this, what really breaks my heart about this is Captain Tom Moore, he was a Burma Star man. He was a heroic soldier who'd given a huge amount. And he, at one stage, he actually encapsulated the spirit of the nation during the time of lockdown, of, you know, sort of, we're going to get through this somehow. And, you know, I don't want to exaggerate the situation. A lot of us drew great strength from him. And now his name is being tarnished. His service is being besmirched by this. I think at one stage the daughter was asking to be paid £100,000 a year.
She was taken on. She was taken on as an interim director of the charity. But initially, I think she had wanted £100,000, and she was paid for a short period of time what would have been £85,000 per annum.
A lot of money to run a very small charity, a fledgling charity.
Yeah. Absolutely, so particularly when the money was being raised for the NHS, so it didn't even have to be dispersed. You didn't even have to actually interview people. You just handed the money over. And I think it is a great tragedy because Captain Tom Moore is exactly the sort of person that we should be admiring and respecting. People who build spas and take £100,000 a year, quite frankly, are on the opposite end.
It reminds me of the distinction between Her Majesty's Queen Elizabeth's service and the Markles.
Well, that's an interesting
It's a pretty fair parallel.
Generational difference.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah,
what can we get from it?
That is a good analogy.
Emma, this story about The Sound of Music, one of my favourite movies of all time.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. What are they doing
Hills
to
are
it?
alive with the sound of trigger warnings, says the Times. Warning may contain Nazis.
Oh, stop.
Stephen and I were saying off air that this is very much like when you get a bag of nuts that says warning may contain nuts.
Yeah.
Of course, it contains Nazis. A very progressive rabbi has commented on this, saying it's actually offensive to the audience to put the trigger warning on in the first place. And some of the other trigger warnings that have been put out recently on similar things. Richard III, warning may contain blood.
Right.
Sorry, that was Macbeth. Richard III, I thought was quite good. That I think it was a university production, warned that it contains ghosts that may be scary. So this is obviously something that we've seen multiple Shakespearean companies doing.
So there might be people watching going, what is a trigger warning? So the idea is that you might be so emotionally sensitive that when a man in a Nazi uniform walks on the stage to sing a song, you might go into some sort of paroxysm of panic. That's the logic behind a trigger warning, isn't it, Stephen?
You know Mel Brooks's film, the producer.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? You know, don't be stupid, be a smarty, come and join the Nazi party.
Yeah.
They'd never get away with that. But look, this is what really worries me about this. This is narrowing people's vision down.
Yeah.
We should have a breadth.
Yes.
We could actually be able to look at these things. And don't forget, The Sound of Music is an anti-Nazi
That's the whole point.
film.
That's the whole point.
They realise that.
Yeah.
Well, it's like when To Kill a Mockingbird was removed from, or trigger warnings were put on it
racist.
when it's an anti-racist book. And I was recently in a National Trust property, and they had a little sign up saying that there was an offensive object coming up, and if you wish to take an alternative route, that alternative routes were available.
And what was the offensive object? Something that had come out of the slave trade or something?
It was a piece of furniture that had iconography of a chained slave.
Right, it's crazy. The Sound of Music is such a happy family film. It came out in about 1964. It is so innocent.
Oh, it's wonderful.
It's also about the triumph of the spirit, or this triumph of the soul.
Yeah,
well, you've got the key thing for me about this is not just that Julie Andrews, I thought, was absolutely gorgeous in that one. But also, the Von Trapp family themselves were actually proud Germans, even though they are Austrians, obviously with the Anschluss. But they were typical of a group of people you don't often hear about, which is the anti-Nazi Germans. And that was great about that. And at the end of it, when they're dancing over the hills into Switzerland, joyous, glorious, Nazis will not prevail. Freedom will prevail.
That's so beautifully put,
How do you
Stephen.
solve a problem like trigger warnings?
Just if you're watching on telly and you're a little bit confused about what we're seeing here, we are going to be taking you up to Prime Minister's questions this morning at midday. These are not people who are in The Sound of Music or talking about The Sound of Music. Just to be clear.
And of course, you won't be seeing Rishi Sunak versus Keir Starmer because they're doing something else. You're going to see Angela Rayner, the Deputy Leader, and Oliver Dowden, the Tories' Deputy Prime Minister.
Question number 7, please, Mr. Speaker.
Right, another woke story, Emma. I mean, this is just all of these.
This is extraordinary.
I can't.
The gift that keeps on giving.
This is extraordinary.
Words out of my mouth, Stephen. So this story is in relation to the rules that the TfL have about putting up
Transport for London.
Transport for London have certain rules about putting up posters that have junk food on them because we live in a nanny state. And this is was a poster put up by a play production, a theatre production called Tony and Tina's Wedding, and it has them balancing themselves on top of a tiered Victoria sponge cake. And they spent a load of money doing this advertising campaign, and then TfL told them they couldn't put it up because having pictures of cake is encouraging obesity.
It's unbelievably stupid, isn't it? This is a show that's come here from Broadway. It's going to be a big West End success, and Transport for London do not think we can gaze on a cake.
And I wish I could show you the picture of this cake, because this story works with the picture as opposed to pictures of the House of Commons right now. But it's a cake, all right, on a pink background, and there's two human beings superimposed dancing around on the cake. One is a bride and one is a groom.
Yeah.
But it's not advertising.
It's not advertising.
No.
It's not telling you go and eat a Victoria sponge, is it?
It's advertising.
When I first saw this, I thought it was going to be Tony and Tonia's wedding, because I was thinking about those bakers in Belfast who actually refused to make a cake for a gay wedding, and I thought this is disgraceful. I thought, what? We're menaced and threatened by the horror of a Victoria sponge.
But it's the same.
Unless it's a sort of.
This is the
Regal Association.
This is the Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan's thought police. This is why he's got to lose.
It's the same as the trigger warnings. It's patronising to people. So it's as if we see a cake and we can't help ourselves but eat it. We see some blood and we can't help ourselves but crying and having a panic attack.
And as you make the point, Amit, the whole point about this poster on the tubes and buses was to draw people to a West End show. The West End needs our support, theatres need our support, and that's what it was doing.
Precisely. In fact, with 1 degree removed, it's almost the mayor acting against culture in this city. And for anybody who travels on London's tube network, you are constantly barraged with these sort of nannying posters telling you what you can and cannot do, not to stare at people, being nannied by the tannoy constantly. They're treating us like children.
If it's wet,
and you
behind your footing.
If you haven't got one.
In hot weather, carry water.
I know, who would have thought about
Who'd have thought it?
Make sure that you secure your loose clothing when the train comes through so you don't get dragged.
And there's messages on all the steps as you're going up and
mind
the escalator.
Mind the step.
It's unbelievable.
It is.
They treat us like we're idiots.
In all honesty, do you think we're approaching tipping point? I think we're approaching the level of nausea. And it's become risible now.
I wish the Tory government would get a grip of this, the culture war, because it's infuriating so many people. People talk about this sort of thing all the time.
Well, the problem is it's a sort of kind of a race for the woke base, if you like, because people are now so anxious and so determined not to. It's sort of this cringing, sort of milquetoast whinging.
But isn't it, Emma? It's about their ESG commitments. I keep saying this. It's about TfL will have environmental and social governance boxes to tick in order to what? In order to go up a ranking list, a corporate ranking list of who is the nicest company, and yet it's not nice at all.
Well, this connects to another story that we've got down on our list, which is Metro Bank not allowing a gender-critical parents group to open an account with them. And again, it's ESG because these banks, for their commercial reasons, they feel that they need to abide by certain things. A lot of the banks are members of Stonewall, which requires them, which is a transgender activist group with radical gender ideology, requires its members to take part in these sort of, we can call them woke initiatives. TfL is exactly the same. And I feel like, going back to what Stephen was saying, it's almost like this sort of python is gradually closing around society and making us less and less free. We're less and less free to transact. We're not free to make our own decisions. We're being constantly nannied and treated like babies. And we're being told that, we're not able to experience good drama or art or literature because it might hurt our feelings. So our world is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller, and the life is being crushed out of us.
And we have to push back against it.
We're at the anniversary of Stonewall. I mean, Stonewall was not specific about transgender. It was actually about attacks on gay men in a bar in New York. But look, there is a debate.
It was then, when it was launched. It had
I agree.
It was a noble organisation once upon a time.
Fair point on that. But look, the point is about these advertisements. Do you remember Are You Beachbody Ready? Heard of the tube. There's a big debate about that. But today we have a problem, which is not TfL, but we have advertisements for a thing called, somewhere where women advertise themselves.
OnlyFans. OnlyFans?
That's the one, because unfortunately the one that's around my way has been painted over, so I can't...
Is it OnlyFans, Emma?
It is OnlyFans.
So you were sure so you can have an OnlyFans account?
Where women actually, for money, will, take their clothes off or whatever online.
And you subscribe to see them in their underwear,
I'm delighted to say that none of us are so familiar with it we can describe it immediately. They've got
it wouldn't do a lot for me, Steve.
But they've got one in Harrow, so I think if there is a point about... And do you remember the Hello Boys with Ever Heard?
Wonderbra.
Yeah, indeed, Wonderbra. underbrush. Oh, sorry, I thought we were back with The Sound of Music.
Yeah, and that was considered so controversial at the time, and literally it was a beautiful woman smiling with a cleavage.
But this is the point. This Only Friends one is pretty similar to that one. But I think there is a proper debate to be had about what is acceptable advertising. What isn't a proper debate is to say you are threatened and horrified. You talk about Boris Johnson got ambushed by a cake. We're all being in danger of being abused by a Victoria Sponge. Grow up.
I know.
Grow a pair.
Well, this is the point that Douglas Murray makes, isn't it? Is that we don't have time for this.
No.
Enough. We have other, better, more important things to be dealing with than this childish nonsense.
We do have to talk briefly.
Talking of childish nonsense.
Yes, we're about to get Prime Minister's questions.
Over to PMQ.
Stephen, you know how childish it often was because you were there many times. It's going to be Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister, standing in for Rishi Sunak.
Oh, look, there's Michael Fabricant.
Against Angela Rayner on the other side. Sunak has been criticised because apparently he's missed more PMQs, Stephen, than any Prime Minister since 1979.
Well, I remember Boris Johnson actually flew to Afghanistan once, didn't he, to avoid voting on Hillingdon Hospital or something. I think it's a shame. Don't forget, I mean, until 97, PMQs, or Qs as we call it, was twice a week. We had them on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
That's right.
And Margaret Thatcher initially hated it, and she grew to absolutely love it.
Well, she was very good at it.
Well, she was, I have to say, from my perspective, she was dreadful because she was so good.
Yeah.
She was very good. I'm enjoying this.
Yes, she was brilliant.
But look, it is now, it's a farce. And the terrible thing is, every single Wednesday morning, we have the briefing for the MPs, and the whips always say this, let's get some noise, let's get some noise. I say, look, please, can we just for once maybe have a rational debate? It never, ever is.
No.
Because it's a bear pit.
It is.
People watch it in America. It's like WWF.
But for 2 weeks of Blair's tenure as Prime Minister, they kept the noise down, but it was never going to last. And within 3 weeks, it was the usual baying, immature mob.
He tried that. I mean, he did have some very, very good team. And I remember Gerald Kaufman was one of his team who said that, and to all the new MPs, he said, remember, there's only one question you can ask the Prime Minister. We said, yeah, what's that? He said, would the Prime Minister care to remind us of his latest triumphs?
Yes, quite. So you can...
But why? But there must be, as you say, they're all intelligent people. Well,
steady on.
Fairly intelligent people in there.
I was
they're
there
all
for
fairly
22 years.
Yeah, you're right.
Quite.
They did let you in, Stephen.
Case point.
But
they let me out, which is more to the point, which they shouldn't have.
But given how much the British public despise the childlike braying and the shouting and the rudeness of these particular types of sessions, is there no impetus from within government to change that?
There is, but it's almost uncontrollable. I think,
Why?
Let me just say, one thing quite odd, you don't often see it. Occasionally, somebody will raise something like cancer treatment of a patient, and then the whole place becomes absolutely...
Well, it shows they can behave themselves then, doesn't it?
It's silent, and then people are grown up about it. And then when you hear people actually making a serious point, it can be a place of seriousness.
But there's also, isn't there also a suggestion that the way it's constructed, the chamber, it is gladiatorial?
It is,
but I think
adversarial.
I think that adversarial system, to defend it, I think that adversarial system is superior to any other parliamentary model. And the baying and everything in Parliament, that is part of the culture. The problem that we have is that the quality of debate that makes that adversarial system work, the calibre of discussion, is so poor that it's not working.
Right.
If you watch PMQs from Tony Benn, Margaret Thatcher, it was superb. But we shouldn't blame the adversarial system
but
and the setup of Parliament.
Don't forget, nowadays, if you watch it, people are reading their speeches from tablets. In my day, you were not allowed to read.
You weren't going to read a question?
No, you couldn't. And people,
if somebody did, they would shout at you,
reading, yeah.
I know, I remember.
And it was very, very different. It's probably you doing the shouting from the press gallery. But it's very, very different. And so you do have that. But don't forget, when the Germans, are we allowed to mention the Nazis?
Yeah, trigger warning.
Trigger warning,
when they bombed
Parliament
and the main... I have to say, their reputation for Teutonic efficiency was slightly diminished by the fact that they bombed it on a non-sitting day. But if you remember, the House of Commons relocated into the House of Lords relocated into the City Hall over the road. And Churchill was asked, when we're going to rebuild it, shall we rebuild it as a
We're going to have to move straight...
Don't be ridiculous.
We're going straight to the Commons chamber because Lindsay Hall is just calling Prime Minister's question time. Sir Lindsay Hall, of course, who's the Speaker. I was in his house only last night, Stephen, at a reception. Oh. Very nice reception it was.
I thought there was a revelation there, Andrew Piss.
Yeah, and of course it will be Oliver Dowden for the Tories, he's the Deputy Prime Minister, versus Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister. To the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle.
Said in a message to the medical profession, on the 5th of July, we start together. The new National Health Service. It has not had an altogether trouble-free gestation. There have been understandable anxieties, inevitable in so great and novel an undertaking, but the sooner we start, the sooner we can try together to see these things and to secure the improvements we all want. It is fair to say that 75 years later, the NHS still faces challenge, but it is right today that we celebrate an institution which treats over 1 million people a day. In particular, I'm sure members across the House want to join me in celebrating the staff of the NHS, past, present and across all our constituencies. To them I say, on behalf of the House, thank you for your outstanding contribution to the health and well-being of us all. And of course, the National Health Service Act is a reminder of the vital role of this House in creating debating legislation as part of a democratic process. So I say to previous MPs, thank you for what you did. We will not forget. Let us now start with Prime Minister's questions. Stephen Metcalfe.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, I have been asked to reply on behalf of my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, who is actually attending a service right now in Westminster Abbey to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the NHS. And, Mr. Speaker, may I associate myself with your comments. The NHS continues to be a treasured national institution, and I'm sure colleagues across the House in this session will join you in celebrating its values, its achievements, and in thanking staff for their huge commitment to patients. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Stephen Metcalfe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I too associate myself with the remarks you made celebrating the 75th anniversary of the NHS, and on behalf of my constituents and all our constituents, thank them for the work they do day in and day out. Last Friday, Mr. Speaker, I met with a group of residents who have raised a petition to keep the last bank in Corringham Town open. The viability of our town centres is often dependent on the presence of a small number of anchor businesses such as a post office or a bank. Can my right honourable friend therefore tell the House what action the government can take to ensure that at least one of these maintains a high street presence to support businesses and residents alike, particularly when these organisations have received significant government support?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this issue. Banks are a cornerstone of our high streets. Of course, it's ultimately a commercial decision for banks, but I do think it's right that they take into account the views of local communities, and I'm sure the bank in question will have heard the remarks to the House from my honourable friend, and I trust that they will take appropriate action.
I now come to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I associate myself and thank you for your opening comments regarding our NHS, and thank all of those staff that have worked and continue to work in our NHS today. And I'm sure members across the whole House will join me in paying tribute to Lord Bob Kerslake, a decent and kind man who accomplished so much in both local and national government during a lifetime of public service. Our heartfelt condolences go to his family. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to see the right honourable gentleman here today. I think I'm right in saying that I have the pleasure again next week, 2 weeks on the trot. They really have given up. Every day, 4,000 families' mortgages deals expire, 100,000 more since we last met, and millions more next year. Families are sick with worry about the cost of the Tory mortgage bombshell. Do they still claim to be the party of home ownership?
Well, may I begin by associating myself with the Right Honourable Lady's remarks about Lord Bob Kerslake. I knew him from my time in Downing Street. He was a stalwart public servant and he will be missed by many on both sides of this House. It may come as a surprise to the Right Honourable Lady, but actually some leaders trust their deputies to stand in for them. When it comes to mortgage rates, I support the independence of the Bank of England taking the necessary measures to control inflation. Just ask the IMF about what we have done in support of them. They've said we have taken decisive and responsible action to bring down inflation, and we will continue to do so. But what's Labour's plan? To borrow £28 billion a year, pushing up inflation. To cut our domestic energy supply, pushing up inflation. And to penalise workers saving into their pensions, pushing up inflation. There we have it from Labour. Endless borrowing and higher prices.
Mr. Speaker, we've had 13 years of Conservative failures, and that homeowners watching that pathetic answer will be cringing that they aren't celebrating the government's success. They're counting the cost of their failures, and the only thing that's not soaring in prices at the moment is these gags that are getting cheaper by the minute. And Mr. Speaker, it's not just homeowners that are suffering. Security of renters have been ripped away too, with higher mortgage costs handed directly to them. Given most renters live in homes with buy-to-let mortgage, can he tell us, are buy-to-let properties included in their mortgage support package, yes or no?
Well, it's actually the case that under this government, and thanks to my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Levelling Up, that we have introduced legislation for the first time to support renters, to give them greater security of tenure, and of course the Chancellor will take all necessary measures to stand behind both mortgage holders and of course take necessary measures for renters. But look, we have a choice in this country, and the choice that we have made is to invest in our economy, giving us the fastest growing economy in the G7 for the past 2 years, creating jobs with record low unemployment and increasing people's wages by providing the national living wage, £1,600 into everyone's pockets. That's how this government is supporting people.
Angela Rayner. Mr. Speaker, I know the Deputy Prime Minister isn't very good on facts, but their party did crash the economy. And he will know that according to his own government's data, over 2 million buy-to-let properties are missing out on support. No-fault evictions are up by 116% this year. So will he tell us if the Prime Minister has a spine now to stand up to the vested interests in his own party and finally deliver their promise to ban no-fault evictions?
Well, I don't think the Prime Minister is going to take any lectures on weakness from the party opposite. I remember there's a lot of talk about reshuffle in the air from the Labour Party. The last time the leader of the Labour Party tried to sack the Right Honourable Lady, she walked out with a promotion. But we will continue to stand behind renters and to support them, and my right honourable friend will take all necessary steps.
Angela Rayner. Mr. Speaker, that answer is pathetic for all those people that are facing homelessness on his watch. We will ban no-fault evictions, Mr. Speaker, unlike the party opposite. And Jessica and her 4 children from Plymouth were evicted from their home in April. They're temporarily living with Jessica's mother in a cramped house where her 2 eldest children are sleeping on blow-up beds in the front room surrounded by their belongings. Hardly the decent, secure life that his government promised. Don't families like Jessica deserve better?
Yes. Deputy Prime Minister. I'll tell you what we're doing for families like Jessica's. We are increasing increasing the national living wage. It was this party that introduced the national living wage, not the party opposite. It is this party that has doubled the personal allowance, cutting taxes for those people. And it is this party that has lifted 1 million people out of unemployment. I'm immensely proud of the record of this government, and that's why people will not trust the party opposite to crash the economy again.
Reina.